All right, you and I are diving into a world where a blonde noblewoman confronts a prisoner tied to a chair. The lad asks what she wants, warning her he is no easy target, but she just gets angry. She demands his name and business. The young man finally speaks. His name is Arthur of the West. She laughs, saying Arthur sounds like a hero's name, which actually fits a handsome guy, but suddenly she kicks his chair, nearly crushing his family jewels. Terrified, the boy shouts that he is a noble of 9 generations. He asks if she wants to end his line right there. She just snarls, demanding the truth. If he lies once, she will end his entire family tree without a single regret. She asks where a stranger like him came from, and Arthur claims he hailed from the far north. She spots a rare, sparkling mead in his pack and asks where he got it. He cannot explain. She kicks the chair again. Arthur snaps, telling her to just kill him instead of playing these games. She levels a crossbow at his head to grant that wish. Arthur yells, "Is this how you treat your savior?" She lowers the weapon, admitting she might have overreacted. She asks if he is a knight from the Northern Alliance, but Arthur claims he is from a far wealthier land, hunting for rare magical components. Arthur warns her the truth is darker than she can imagine. She says she has no clue what remains in this ruined city. Arthur suggests a deal. Perhaps she could serve as his personal guide. He is new here and needs help. When she asks about the coin, he tells her to check his pocket. She pulls out a golden locket. He calls it a small starter gift for their new partnership. She is thrilled. Arthur smirks, promising there is plenty more where that came from if she plays along. He asks for her name. She is Lady Seraphina and warns that any betrayal leads straight to the grave. Arthur swears he is loyal. All he needs is an experienced guide who knows these dangerous lands inside out. Now pay attention. She asks what he is truly hunting. He wants ancient relics and magic gear like hers. His people cannot craft such wonders anymore, so he traveled to the ruined city to scavenge for them. Seraphina says craftsmen here still forge gear, suspecting the boy is hiding his true intentions from her. Arthur brushes it off, claiming his own realm has magic far beyond anything she has ever seen here. She demands to know her reward. Arthur panics. He has no idea what kind of currency this world uses. He asks what she desires. To his surprise, she admits she prefers to be paid in fresh food. You and I might be confused. Food. She asks for more of that roasted quail she tasted earlier. He says it is all gone. Angered, she tries to kick him again, but Arthur makes a huge offer. He promises 10 crates of food every month. She smiles instantly. The deal is officially sealed between them. Arthur asks to be untied since they are partners. Seraphina finally releases the boy from his wooden chair. He nearly weeps as blood returns to his numb hands. She reminds him his safety is now her responsibility. Arthur scoffs, knowing she only cares because his death means no more food. She asks if they leave. Arthur is hesitant. Why step outside when there are terrifying monsters prowling in every shadow of the ruins? She tells him to relax. This is Westbury in the year 1290, where ghouls roam the streets. Arthur realizes he is in trouble. He is just a student from the year 1217. He is lost. He had somehow traveled through time, landing in a dark, parallel version of his own familiar world. He never dreamed he would gain such a strange power. Back in June of 1217, Arthur was just talking to his mother. She asked about his search for a knightly apprenticeship, and he lied, saying it was fine. She asks if he needs more gold. Arthur admits his coins have run out completely. He promises it is the last time, but she reminds him he finished school a full year ago. Arthur argues that good jobs are rare, but she starts comparing him to his much more successful cousin. She tells him to come home and help his father on the swine estate. Arthur refuses the chores. His mother snaps that those pigs are his future. Frustrated, Arthur just hangs up the magic mirror. He pulls out a sparkling mead and sighs, wondering how he will ever break this curse of poverty. Arthur sees a falling star and wishes for any grand work. Trust me, he is about to get his wish. All right, you and I are starting with Arthur, a man dreaming of a promotion until a falling star changes everything. The boy gets struck by the falling light, granting him the legendary power to step into different worlds at will. A glowing mark appears on his wrist, serving as a permanent key to travel across the vast, unknown otherworld. Arthur soon discovers the mark holds a secret vault, providing him with his very own pocket dimension for storage. He takes his first leap and lands inside a rotting, silent manor, seemingly abandoned to the ages. As Arthur explores the dust, he finds old scrolls on the floor and searches for any clues. The scrolls reveal he is in the year 2190, centuries past his own timeline's peak. This is still the capital of Westhaven, but transformed into a decaying, haunted shadow of itself. Suddenly, a purple ghoul appears at the window, forcing Arthur to flee back home before things get even bloodier. Safely home, he notices the mark has vanished. It seems his first trip used up all of his energy. He tries sticking his fingers into a lightning socket to recharge his mark, but he just gets a massive shock. After that jolt, he knows that world has riches beyond belief, but he needs a better strategy. Arthur heads to the town square to stock up on food and steal for his next dangerous trek. He returns to the ruins, finding the area deathly silent. It seems the ghouls only emerge when the sun disappears. The undead are hiding for now, but Arthur stays on high alert since he knows nothing about this nightmare world. He realizes he needs a fortress to survive. Soon, he spots a sturdy stone tower that looks like a perfect base. The heavy doors are barred, so he peers through the glass to see if any monsters are inside. Finding it empty, he breaks in, convinced that no one has set foot here in many long years. Now watch this part carefully. A hand grabs his boot. Arthur kicks back in a panic, but it's just a human girl. The girl, Elowen, threatens his life, but Arthur just calmly asks what she needs to survive. Water, that's all she wants. Arthur says she's in luck because he has plenty of water in his backpack. He gives her the water and asks how she feels, but she's still starving for a real meal. Arthur hands over a tin of food. Back in the present, Elowen locks the doors to keep them safe. In this wasteland, she could have easily been a Mainator or a slave driver looking for easy coin. She asks how he carries so much. Arthur lies, saying his invisible partners handle the heavy lifting. He notices rare paintings on the walls, but they are from artists who never existed in his world. These relics are far beyond his kingdom's tech. Elowen explains they broke during the Great Blasts. Even broken, the inner components are worth a fortune at the survivor outposts nearby. Arthur is stunned. These advanced machines look exactly like the legendary prototypes from his own era. Elowen warns him to stay quiet. If the ghouls hear a whisper, the doors won't hold. Arthur is actually fortifying this place against human thieves, planning to turn this building into his personal supply vault. Now here's the part you and I need to watch. He asks for a map, and Elowen demands his crystal slab. Confused, he watches as she pulls out a glowing crystal pad and scoffs at his ignorance. She hands it over, shocked that any explorer would wander this dead city without a navigator. It works. When asked where she found it, she coldly admits she took it from a corpse. Arthur's stats flash on the screen. Elowen laughs, seeing his combat power is barely even at 20. She mocks his strength, but when he jokes back, she levels a loaded crossbow at his chest. She is clearly unhinged. Arthur decides to save his flirting for the safer, civilized world. Elowen realizes she shouldn't bite the hand that feeds her now that her stomach is finally full. He seems like a kind, innocent man, but in this dying world, being kind is just another word for dead. This ruin is overflowing with treasures. Even the simplest tools here are more advanced than his kingdom's best prototypes. But he can't sell these strange devices yet. Right now, he needs one thing above all: gold. Elowen is confused, but Arthur knows that in this wasteland, gold is worthless compared to a warm, fresh meal. Arthur hands her a fresh loaf of bread for her breakfast, along with another tin for later. And that's where we leave them. Stick around because seeing her cry over a piece of bread, that hits different. All right, you and I are watching a world where she has seen friends killed and even eaten for survival. Bandits had even tried to butcher her for meat, so seeing John actually care if she was hungry felt unreal. John tells her that a proper breakfast will give her strength, and Sarah thanks him, promising to work her hardest. She is determined to find the treasure hidden in the royal vaults, though carrying it all back is the real challenge. An anti-magic field had drained the city's power, rendering all magical carriages useless, so John tells her to move carefully. He warns her to just scout the locations and return before the sun sets, so Sarah packs her gear into her rucksack. Before she heads out, John asks to see her magic soul stats, and when she reveals her power, he is completely floored. He wonders if she is even still human after seeing those numbers. Then he quickly shifts back to his own world. Resting in his bed, he knows he needs to recharge his magic crest, but drawing power from a lamp is useless. He taps directly into the town's central mana well, but accidentally drains the whole district, leaving everyone in total darkness. As the angry townsfolk start shouting, he flees back to his room, desperately trying to find a better way to fuel it. Now pay attention here, because our hero is about to face a truly massive magical problem. It warns that if the curse levels exceed 50%, his very life will be at risk, so he must stay vigilant. He needs to bank 1,000 mana units in his tablet and wonders if holy salt would help, but decides to eat first. While dining, he wonders how many bars of gold this simple steak would cost in that cursed land, thankful he is safe. He knows that if a great war ever broke out in his kingdom, a simple scholar like him wouldn't survive long. He shakes off the dark thoughts and checks his pack, preparing to cross back over to the nightmare land once again. Back in the ruins, John realizes his stamina is still high, and his weight hasn't shifted, making him wonder about his limits. His body feels strangely light despite the heavy load, leading him to think his magic storage capacity has actually leveled up. He has other ideas to test out. Entering the kitchen, he stares at a runic panel, wondering how to use it. He pulls a heavy lever, and suddenly the entire room glows with magical light. Life here might not be so bad. Then he spots Sarah at the front gate, looking like she is carrying a heavy haul. She tries to scale the wall. John taps a rune, and the massive gate swings open instantly, sending poor Sarah tumbling face first onto the hard dirt ground. She snaps at him, asking if he is trying to kill her, but quickly explains the vault was swarming with ghouls. She had to burn through all her enchanted arrows to clear them, but she managed to bring back heavy gold bars. John is amazed she carried that weight alone and hands her a cold tonic, knowing how much she enjoys the taste. Sarah gulps it down, baffled by how it stayed so cold, but John just explains the magic cooling chest is working. You and I both know that breaking into a royal vault is never as easy as it sounds. They would need powerful explosives or a master locksmith to bypass the runic seals. John asks where to find such experts. Sarah tells him these experts gather at neutral outposts, like the high-walled settlement of Luden, a very interesting place. But she warns him that everything in Luden is incredibly expensive, as visitors must pay a steep price just to enter. You either pay with a rare mana gem or items of equal worth. She pulls out a glowing stone to show him. It holds about 37 units of pure mana, which her tablet confirms, but getting these gems is a deadly task. These cores only grow inside the skulls of elite monsters. When John picks up the gem, his crest begins to react. He realizes the gem can recharge his magic crest instantly. Sarah explains that these mana stones are the world's primary currency. John offers her 3 tins of preserved food for the gem, and she quickly agrees, though she warns him against bad deals. If he trades like that with others, they will rob him blind. Then she admits this will be her first real feast. She has never had stew before. The best thing she ever ate was a dry piece of monster beef that barely satisfied. John realizes this world is far more complex than he imagined. He looks over at the pile of gold they have gathered. He wonders if he should just walk away now, knowing that one wrong move in this wasteland could cost his life. He is terrified, but he cannot let Sarah see his fear. She tells him that since he's her boss, she will protect him. It is her duty to ensure no bandits or thieves take advantage of him. John just stares at her in stunned silence. He wonders if she is actually trying to comfort him. Sarah blushes and tells him to stop staring before it gets weird. She opens the cold storage box and her eyes widen. John says since the magic is working, they should celebrate properly tonight. And trust me, you and I are going to want to see what they find in that vault. All right, you and I are diving into a world where a simple meal is worth more than gold. Sonia remembers her family's warmth and the happiness they shared before the kingdom fell into a decade of darkness. The fortress was heaven until rogue knights proved that no refuge is safe from the greedy and the desperate. Those monsters preyed on the innocent, stealing every scrap of supply from the poor souls fleeing the ruins. That is how she became a hardened survivor, but Arthur just wants her to stop and eat. He tells her to relax, or she'll slice the table in half instead of the fresh fruit. These ingredients were grown with blood and sweat, so every single cut needs to be absolutely perfect. Now watch. You can practically taste the desperation here when even a simple meal feels divine. Sonia admits she's never tasted anything this good. In this blighted land, it's like a dream. She recalls old legends from the fortress libraries, where everyone actually lived happily, ever after in the end. Arthur steps away for a moment, eventually returning with his arms full of cold, frothy ale. He explains that back in his homeland, people drink to drown out the noise of life. Sonia hates the bitter taste, but he insists that a strong drink hides any bad thoughts. Soon enough, both of them are laughing and stumbling under the heavy weight of the alcohol. Arthur jokes that ghouls are nothing compared to the great trial students face in his home kingdom. It devours a young man's coin and his family's legacy, forcing everyone to carry their heavy dreams on their backs. He calls it a blessing for strength, while Sonia curiously asks him what kind of legendary feast that is. I know what you're thinking. This is where Arthur starts describing the true hell of his old life. He warns her about cruel masters who torture their workers, but Sonia says she'd be the master. Arthur eventually takes her cup away, seeing that she's far too drunk to hold her own. She suddenly puts him in a lethal lock, demanding to know how he has the nerve to steal from her. Arthur manages to break free and pins her down just to show her who's in charge. She laughs and says she wants to be on top, and by morning, they're together. Arthur apologizes for the long night and promises he will take full responsibility for his actions with her. She smiles, asking if he'll protect her forever, even though she has a long list of enemies. But the protagonist isn't afraid of them, swearing to stand firm by her side regardless. Sonia has a final quest she must complete, and Arthur swears his help to her cause. She kisses him deeply, asking if he's just going to stare now that he's her man. He asks for a moment to rest, but she pulls him along, telling him to hurry. Looking at the dark sky, Arthur asks if a storm is coming, but it's cursed ash. They are exposed to the blight, but she says her holy tincture will keep them safe from the corruption. As long as the levels stay low, they're fine, though Arthur regrets his crazy ideas. Sonia insists that he needs to learn a few things about combat to stay alive. He claims he's just a lowly scholar, which only makes her more determined to drag him out for training. She drags him out the very next day, heading straight toward the most dangerous ruins. The area is infested with the undead, so she tells the young man to ready his weapon immediately for battle. Since he's a novice, she hands him a heavy repeater crossbow to use on the battlefield. Arthur asks if the mutants will strike, but Sonia explains that even monsters feel fear. She explains that even monsters feel fear, and most creatures avoid humans despite being far larger than them. Their rotting brains need a stable environment to function, so they aren't very active during the daylight hours. Still, he must watch for the man-eaters and shoot anyone who dares to target him. Arthur realizes just how dangerous this kingdom has become since the Great Fall. Suddenly, Sonia stops. The mutants are fleeing, meaning something far more powerful is hunting nearby in the shadows. A massive explosion rocks the earth, and she runs toward the battle, calling for him. And that's where we leave it. Trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next. All right, you and I are diving into a world where knights scream to keep shooting and launch explosives as guards. Fire upon a mutated abomination. Sir Alaric watches the mountain of flesh, wondering why that species had reached their kingdom. A knight shouts they cannot hold much longer. They launch a heavy mana bolt at the monster, and it roars. The beast takes a precise hit to the skull, ending it. Alaric knows only siege engines kill such monsters, Sand says. Lord Julian asks what these men are doing. Lady Alina explains they hunt mana shards and harvest rot for fertilizer. The two approach, and the guard demands their blood seals. These are unique magical marks used as identity for users. Calculated by ancient spells, the seals serve as ID. Right as the heavy gate creaks open, the guard grants passage. Pay attention here, the guard says they can enter. Julian thought the frontier was lawless, but he was wrong. He believed he had only seen a fraction of this civilization. Humanity survived, but it developed in dark ways. Civilization is the accumulation of beliefs and creations since time began. In this case, humanity was clearly still there. However, it developed abnormally. If he described it in one word, the technology level would be completely disproportionate. He sees a merchant calculating earnings on a glowing crystal lens, while seeing people with missing limbs is common. Seeing suffering was common. If he had to describe life in the Crimson District, it would be simply unequal. Starving men and women were everywhere. Julian thinks they no longer have the energy to even cry for food. Alaric says this is normal because the Crimson District is a regional base. The laws here are very simple. If you kill or steal, you hang. Cheat and you are expelled. Property damage results in a long imprisonment. Suddenly, a woman takes a blow from a guard. Alina suggests Julian stay quiet to avoid any unnecessary trouble. He is irritated the guard hasn't been dealt with yet, but Alina tells him to stay out of it. That man is the inspector responsible for clearing corpses. He tells Julian he will quickly get used to it. You and I saw that coming, right? The inner ward is cleaner, but it costs 1 mana unit to enter. They came to trade at the outer market, which should be enough. Although the market is filthy, it beats the slums. In that place, thieves and other criminals are killed. Their bodies are dumped in city trash pits at night. Inspectors drag those bodies to the farm to mix them with monster fat, turning them into accursed fertilizer. However, the worst criminals are impaled on stakes as a warning so others won't commit crimes. Sometime later, a man eyes a woman's body, mentioning her beauty. He guarantees they are high-quality products with no flaws. He demands 50 mana shards, claiming that is a fair price. A young noble seems to close the deal. As he leaves, the merchant tells him to ensure he continues bringing high-quality products from the bastions. Alina watches the situation, noting they are heading to the Gilded Rose, a house of lust for the guests. She heard the girls they were soft, but only in the sense of devouring. That merchant is a hunter. He likely enslaved those from Sanctuary 101. Julian asks what those sanctuaries were and why they exist. Alina says they were peculiar, each with a unique philosophy, but all aiming to maximize their chances of survival. She was born in Sanctuary 71 and was lucky. However, the other bastions were not as fortunate as hers. She heard the philosophy of Sanctuary 70 was to rule through fear, leading people to sanctify their leader. With that creed, the sanctuary turned into hell after 10 years. The leader abandoned all modesty and became a dictator. He used the magical security to eliminate all men, keeping only the women for his use for over 10 years. As for Sanctuary 101, it was empty, but it stored the DNA records of the ancient world elites. In the end, the Forbidden War was triggered, and who knows what artificial products came out of those dark incubators. The old war planners predicted these things would be useful in the Ashlands. It is a calculated and terrifying nightmare. Julian thinks this is the end of humanity. Meanwhile, a stone golem powered by crystals begins its grim work. It is a Type 2 golem working in the ashlands. Its job is to assess the price of goods. The concept of irritation does not exist in its programming. However, it had to work in this dying world. Stick with me, because this story is just getting started. Julian watches as the golem continues its cold calculations. Julian thinks humanity is doomed. Meanwhile, a Type 2 golem begins its work in the shadows of the district. Its job is to assess the value of goods found in the ruins. It acts as a cold machine. Trust me, you'll see. All right, stick with me, because we're about to see how a single tin can change a man's entire life. Julian steps up, offering a trade. The machine freezes, thinking its own processor must be failing because of what it sees. The scanner shows the impossible, an item with 0 radiation. This just does not happen in the ruins of the Old Kingdom. It is a vintage tin of pre-war beefsteak, perfectly preserved. The robot is stunned and asks if the boy has any more. Since Julian has plenty, the machine leads him straight to the royal lounge. A high-tier merchant is on her way to handle the deal. There, Julian meets a charming young lady named Alina. She greets him with a warm smile that feels a bit too perfect for this. She tells him it is a true honor to serve a guest of his stature and invites him into the private chambers to talk. Julian suspects a trap, but then Alina suddenly leans in close. She seems to be making a move while the shadows watch them. Julian watches Alina as her face shifts. She looks genuinely worried about the danger lurking just outside the door right now. She is annoyed Julian only got 50 shards per tin. These are not just food, they are priceless artifacts that fetch a fortune. If they sold these to the nobles in the High Citadel, they would get double. But Julian has his own reasons for the trade. He does not care about the profit. He just needs enough mana shards to recharge his mysterious mark up to 30% power. Alina asks if he actually knows what the Royal Lounge is for. He thinks it is just a place for high-value trading, right? Now pay attention, because the Royal Lounge offers way more than just good deals. She whispers a secret directly into his ear. She mentions that this place provides special company. If they weren't being hunted, she would show him exactly what she means by service. Julian wonders why she would prefer this dangerous life when she has other options. But there is no time to debate her choices today. Suddenly, Julian spots a threat. He tells the boy not to look and to act natural. They need to vanish before they are spotted. Alina pulls him into a kiss to hide their faces. She tells him she will handle the trouble because no one dares fight here. She has got her own way of dealing with scavengers. If they play the part of lovers, they can slip away without those thugs. They just need to keep moving toward the next tavern. Julian tries not to look back as they navigate these dangerous, crowded streets. Meanwhile, a back-alley doctor examines Julian's arm, demanding payment immediately. Julian looks at his hand and wonders if that sum is enough for them. Alina says they just have to wait. They need to head to the gun store next to buy ammunition for their weapons. They will hole up there for the night. The wasteland is crawling with terrors, but it is also a big opportunity for him later. The night is full of terrors, but it is also a chance for Julian to prove himself. The real work is about to begin. While Julian eats, he wonders if they are safe. Alina warns him that the millionaires in this district will shoot any trespasser on sight. Up in the High Citadel, they do not even ask for your name before pulling the trigger. It is a world where only rich have rights. Julian asks why they are keeping a captive around after dinner. Suddenly, Alina's mood flips, and she draws her weapon on the terrified spy. The boy panics, claiming it was all a mistake. He shouts that he had no intention of causing trouble, but she is not listening. She delivers a sharp slap, demanding to know who sent him. Julian watches in shock, realizing Alina is more than just a pretty face. He never imagined she could be this terrifying. But to understand why, we need to look back at the last 30 minutes. You and I need to rewind 30 minutes to see how they got into this mess. Anti-aircraft cannons were literally firing at them. Julian had to crack open another tin of fruit just to calm his nerves. Seeing military hardware in a hotel was absolutely insane. The captured spy begs for his life, claiming this is illegal. He shouts that the city watch will come and arrest them for this. Alina does not have time for his games. She gets straight to the point, staring him down with ice-cold eyes that promise nothing but pain. She asks how a peasant in those rags expected to survive in the low ward. She caught him following them, and she was right. She levels her gun right at the boy's lap. Alina is done being nice, and she is about to show him what happens to rats. She promises to take one of his parts every 10 seconds until he talks. The boy is absolutely terrified, weeping and begging for mercy. He swears he knows nothing and begs her to let him go. Julian finally steps in, saying he is not a fan of torture. But if the boy keeps lying in this filthy ward, Julian might have to give his assistant some very painful ideas to try out. Julian reminds him that he is a businessman and would rather make a fair deal than resort to blood. If he cooperates, he lives. The boy can choose to tell the truth or die for a lie. Julian tells him his boss will not be nearly as generous. The truth finally spills out. It was the Cinder Raiders. Julian turns to Alina, asking if she has heard of this group before now. Alina nods grimly. She knows them well. They are a savage group that thrives on human trafficking and raiding the survivors of the wastes. They loot anyone they find and occasionally sell protection to clients. They are the worst kind of scum in this broken kingdom. And that is where the real nightmare begins. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. It all started at the shop. All right, you and I are diving into a world where greed and magic collide in the worst way. They have to move fast to finish the job, so he orders them toward the back of the local apothecary shop right now. The other asks if he found another helpless lamb, and the rogue confirms it, though they must wait and see. They need to see if the prize is worth it, just as our hero, Arthur, starts approaching their position. Arthur is with his companion, and the bandit tells his men to wait since he looks like a spoiled noble. Watch this closely, because the lady at his side smells like trouble, and she is definitely more than she seems. He wonders where his spy is, and orders a subordinate to find him while keeping a close eye on the pair. He thinks that once the target is confirmed, all they need to do is track them through the city streets. Suddenly, something catches his eye, and he is stunned as he watches the two continue their journey. He realizes they are heading into a healing sanctuary, but shortly after, they are on the move again. They even stop to buy a massive stash of enchanted bolts, meaning they need to be extra cautious. You and I both know that buying that many weapons only means one thing. Arthur is looking for a fight. He orders the spy to track them and report once they leave the kingdom city, promising him 5 gold sovereigns for the job. The spy asks if that means 5 lambs for the slaughter, and the leader nods, confirming the plan. They visited the sanctuary, and then the armory for bolts and fire flasks, which is very strange for simple travelers. Only fools would trade rare mana shards for simple steel, so the bandits assume these two are easy marks. They want to strike fast before any other mercenary group spots these clueless travelers and steals the prize. The spy claims he knows the drill and is told to go exchange his mana shard immediately. He is shocked it is only 100 credits, since 1 credit buys 10 healing elixirs for the commoners. With that kind of coin, he could live like a king for a month, but then a crossbow is aimed. The rogue is executed instantly. Julian watches this and gets nervous, seeing a man die right in front of him. Alina, however, just complains about bloodstains being hard to wash out, saying she can handle this dirty work. Arthur admits he needs to toughen up. Then Alina sits on his lap and asks if he plans to stay. Arthur asks if she already knows his secrets, and she replies that a woman's intuition is never wrong. She hugs him tightly, begging him not to leave her behind, but he knows he could never abandon her. He remembers deciding that night that his original plan to just take the gold and run was over. He wanted to return to his realm and live like a duke, but he can no longer walk away. He will find a way to bring her with him, because nobody deserves to live in this hellish kingdom. She says she trusts him, while Arthur jokingly mentions that if it weren't for the grime, he would embrace her. If the smell is the only problem, she decides right then and there to go find a wash basin. But Arthur refuses to let her go, so she asks him to carry her to the baths himself. She wants to see if that strength elixir actually made his muscles harder while they prepare for the water. They get ready for the bath, and well, things start to happen that would definitely make a village priest blush quite hard. Afterward, Alina is genuinely impressed that the elixir worked, while Arthur just admires his newly perfected physique. He is staring at his perfect abs until Alina tells him to stop daydreaming and get back to work. Arthur wants dinner first, but they have to deal with the dead man's body left in the room. He feels awkward about his romantic moment happening next to a corpse and vows to have better timing. Later, hotel staff arrive to remove the body, apologizing for the lack of security in the noble quarters. They offer the pair a free feast at the royal restaurant as an apology for the messy situation. Alina tells them to just go, as they were leaving anyway, while the young clerk apologizes one last time. Alina says she has no interest in eating local salted beef anymore, while Arthur starts preparing his own meal. He asks if she wants to know how he pulled a sack of grain out of thin air. She says she does not care because Arthur wouldn't tell her the truth anyway, and she is just hungry. Arthur finishes the meal, and she is stunned by the table full of exotic food as she starts eating. Alina loves every bite, and trust me, you and I are going to love the twist coming up next. All right, you and I are about to see what happens when 3 days of food vanishes during a single massive feast. Arthur was still starving, realizing the holy elixir was potent, and noticed Alina's hunger was more than just simple greed. She caught him staring and asked what his problem was, since she really did put away a truly massive amount of food. Arthur joked that if she kept eating like a dragon, he would never be able to afford her tab at the tavern. Blushing, Alina promised to eat less next time, but realized he was just teasing her and got instantly irritated by his games. He took her hand and promised that no matter how much she ate, he would always be able to provide for her. He thanked the gods for his quick wit, because he almost got his teeth knocked out by her legendary temper just then. Alina smirked, saying that since he took the elixir, she would not have to hold back her kicks when she hit him. He told her to stop talking and get some rest, while he finished cleaning up the mess from their late-night meal. Tucked in, Alina explained that the Grand Bank sat in a district that was once a wealthy and prosperous seat of power. Now it was crawling with the risen, and the magic blight in the air was reaching an extremely deadly and high level. Now pay attention here. They need to reach a very specific spot in the ruins if they want to get their hands on that gold. Arthur pointed at a glowing image in the corner, and she explained it was actually an arcane scrying projection for their journey. It was a magical map, far more powerful than any standard scroll, though its performance could be a bit temperamental at times. He asked if the beasts there were truly lethal, and she warned they were nothing like the weak ghouls from that morning. They were covered in natural plate armor, meaning standard arrows and blades would not cause any sort of fatal wounds to them. Running was the only option, though these monsters usually stayed deep within the blighted zones and only hunted outside on rare occasions. She gave him 2 choices: sneak into the depths and blast the vault open using some very high-level alchemical explosives, or reach the control room and use ancient runes to bypass the magical security locks and gain access to the server. Arthur was stunned by her knowledge and asked if this information was coming from a source that they could actually trust. She learned it all in the city of Haven, where they have maps scried directly from the stars with incredible accuracy. She mentioned Haven sat atop a massive flying fortress before telling the protagonist it was finally time to make his big decision. Arthur decided the first plan was far too dangerous, as a vault explosion would bring every monster in the kingdom to them. Arthur chooses the second plan and decides to hire a specialist, though Alina wonders if he is really prepared for the risks involved. She joked that she could break any lock right in front of him, before admitting she was just pulling his leg. A warrior only needs good archery to survive the blighted lands, but specialists for hire were plenty since everyone was so broke. Since everyone in the slums was desperate, hiring a master of runes would not cost much more than a few scraps. Arthur settles on the second plan, but trust me, hiring a specialist in this world is a massive gamble for anyone. Elinor worried about the shadow mercenaries, knowing they would want revenge for the men they had already lost in the previous fight. Arthur whispered a secret plan into her ear, promising they could handle the sellswords as soon as they left the safe area. She admitted he was tougher than he looked, and they agreed to find their specialist at first light the very next day. Arthur suggested they split up so she would stay hidden, since her face was already known to every local thug and outsider. She scoffed, saying a few mercenaries were nothing to her, and she only stayed for his protection and nothing else at all. Irritated, the boy thought to himself that he was perfectly capable of leaving this wretched place whenever he truly wanted to go. Later that day, Arthur stood outside and marveled at how strange and unpredictable the climate had become since the Great War. A shady merchant handed him a parchment, asking if this was the sort of skilled talent he was looking to purchase today. Arthur wanted a rune master, but the man was trying to sell him a disgraced former noble who once ran a company. He realized that in this broken world, a single tin of preserved meat held more value than any ancient noble title. The merchant returned shortly, claiming that everything was nearly finished and the candidates were ready for his final review and approval. Since simple tasks did not require high magic, many brilliant rune specialists were being sold as common laborers around the district. Arthur scanned the list of names on the paper, noting that a few of the specialists actually seemed to have decent skills. He asked why the list was full of outlaws, and the man explained that most refugees have no freedom here anymore. Those who cannot survive the ghetto become the property of the Iron District, a place that was still somewhat humane to them. The ones for sale were either cast-offs or criminals, but the merchant swore they were all quite manageable for a new master. They wear magic collars, so you and I can rest easy. They won't be causing any trouble even if they tried. Stick with me here. Silas realizes he has no choice but to step in and handle this messy situation himself. One of them must serve, but he has to be careful. Suddenly, a guard levels a flintlock at someone. He threatens to fire, but then a blue-eyed girl rushes out and hugs Silas. The guard claims she was a "watch this" refugee who escaped, begging Silas to buy her because she knows how to decipher ancient scripts. As they drag her away, Silas is asked if he is all right, but his mind is only on her. He asks where she is going. The merchant says the front lines, but Silas wonders if she can survive. The merchant explains she is older than she looks. They only place magic collars on those over 16 years old. She simply hasn't grown physically yet. Regardless of her small size, Silas decides right then and there to take her. Let's be real. He knows she won't last 2 days in a war zone with a fragile little body like that. The merchant makes a disgusting comment about Silas's taste, saying there are thousands more just like this little girl. Silas snaps that he talks too much. Terrified, the man bows, and that is why we root for this guy. Stick with me. Lord Arthur is about to show everyone how a real noble handles business. He asks about the transfer time and asks for his address. Arthur offers 2 mana shards to speed things up, though the clerk stammers about the law. Arthur drops a 3rd stone to make his point. Suddenly, the clerk promises to handle everything for him right away. The official asks for just a minute. Arthur realizes that being an authority figure feels incredibly powerful right now. Moments later, the man confirms the girl has arrived. Everything is ready, and all that's left is for him to sign. Now pay attention here. This is where things get interesting. He explains the medical exams are for her own safety. He assures Arthur that her purity remains completely intact. Without a word, the Lord simply signs the official document. The man promises a personal escort to ensure their safety, calling it an absolute honor to serve a noble again. Arthur asks for the girl's name. It is Alara. Then, to test her, the Lord asks if she knows rune logic. She says yes, having earned high marks in the Academy's arcane cipher course. She mentions her skill in breaking magical wards. Arthur laughs. You and I wonder, why is she in this state? All right, you and I are diving into a world where one girl's survival instinct changes everything. Alara explains that while she was no master, she had enough hidden talent to be worth Julian's time. She still had potential and was far from a bad investment. Julian immediately grabs a thick cloak and hands it over, telling her to stay warm in this harsh, unforgiving weather. He didn't want her falling ill, knowing that medicine was a luxury in this kingdom. They needed to move fast before the local guards started asking too many unwanted questions. They had no time to waste. As they head out, Julian mentions he'll introduce her to Lady Isabella. Watch closely, things at the manor are about to get very tense. Back at the estate, Isabella jokingly asks if Julian has a thing for picking up stray girls. Julian knew she'd say that, but he has a solid reason for this. He assures his sister that Alara is a master of ciphers. Isabella immediately asks the big question, can they actually trust a girl from the streets with their family secrets? Julian claims Alara has no ties to the Cinder Legion mercenaries. However, Isabella isn't buying it. Her own safety is on the line, and she refuses to trust blindly. Isabella scrutinizes Alara, asking if she knows a notorious spy named Silas. Now, let's see how Alara handles this pressure. It is a make-or-break moment for her. Alara quickly denies knowing anyone by that name. To dodge more questions, she says she will go check on the young lady, hoping Julian doesn't mind the intrusion. Isabella quips that she's just inspecting the girl to see if she is truly trustworthy. She teases Julian, asking why his face is turning red all of a sudden. With a mischievous smirk, she watches him blush. Julian awkwardly says he will go check on things himself. A while later, the young lord finds himself alone with his thoughts. Julian stares out at the horizon, rubbing a fresh bump on his head. He realizes the girl wasn't carrying any hidden tracking spells or enchanted devices on her person. He wonders how someone so young and talented ended up with nothing to her name. If she's really just a girl, why does she have such a mysterious background? Soon after, Isabella hands some fine linen clothes to Alara, who begins to dress. Isabella asks why her brother is acting so incredibly embarrassed by the whole situation. She reminds him that the girl is technically his ward now. Even if he made a move, she wouldn't be in any position to refuse his noble authority. Julian asks Isabella if she's not the least bit jealous. She laughs it off, telling him he should just enjoy his new company and stop being so tense. Julian tells her to drop the jokes so they can focus on what matters. He officially introduces the girl to his inner circle, marking a new chapter for them. He tells her his name is Julian and her new name will be Alara. He makes it clear she's one of them now, an equal in his eyes. She doesn't need to call him Lord, just Julian. He adds that the iron collar she's wearing is dangerous, especially since he already trusts her more than most. However, Alara suddenly panics, begging him not to remove the collar. She looks absolutely terrified by what Julian is about to do, which catches him completely off guard. Confused, Julian asks what's wrong. Alara explains it's not that she dislikes having a kind protector, but she's haunted by a dark warning from her past life. A woman told her she was blessed to be chosen, and without that collar, she'd be abandoned. Trust me, you and I are about to see this mystery deepen. All right, you and I are diving into a world where a simple act of kindness feels like a trap. In this kingdom, knights turn on their brothers, and fathers sell their own children for a scrap of bread. That is why she feared his trust vanished the moment he shattered her iron slave collar. Arthur knows she's right. It is only natural for people to be unpredictable in a land this dark. She promises to stay obedient, hoping her loyalty alone will keep her from ever being cast out into the cold. The girl has no grand ambitions. She just wants to survive, though a little extra comfort wouldn't hurt. Now watch this. Lord Arthur places a hand on her head, swearing that her life will change for the better. He sends her to the washroom, but as she leaves, he's left alone with his heavy thoughts. To these girls, he must seem like a fool, a kind-hearted child playing at Lord in a truly brutal era. In this realm, a man who refuses to be ruthless is a rare, almost impossible thing to find. He wonders if they would ever feel truly safe if they finally reached a peaceful kingdom one day, while the girls go to bathe. Inside the royal baths, Isabella tells the young girl to relax, claiming she's not like the others in her faction. She notices how soft the girl's skin is, which she says is due to the power of the magic slumber crystal. You see where this is going, right? Isabella calls it a fancy toy, asking if the girl is actually older than her. She clarifies it is not so, explaining she entered stasis at 12 and stayed frozen for 20 years. Thanks to the magic elixirs, her body only aged 2 years while she slept in that deep, frozen tomb. Counting the 2 years spent in the slums, the royal doctor says she's physically 16, but mentally only 14. Isabella laughs, saying that adding 12 and 20 makes her 32, which irritates the poor girl to no end. She insists she's young, then pulls Isabella into the water as they start splashing around playfully. Arthur hears the commotion and smiles, glad to see his two companions are finally getting along so well. Soon after, Isabella steps out draped in a towel, calling for the younger girl to follow her out. And as she rests, you and I can tell this moment of peace is over as he asks her to cover up. All right, you and I are about to see how a simple meal turns into a fight for survival. Alina says she just needs her cloak first. Later, Julian tells the young girl to sit and join their feast. Looking at the massive abundance of food on the table, Lily wonders if she is stuck in a beautiful dream. She bites her hand hard, proving it is real. Julian warns her to eat before Marcus devours everything. With teary eyes, she asks if she can really eat. Julian promises she can have whatever she wants. Sitting at the table, Julian bickers with Marcus to eat slower, while Lily watches with tears of joy in her eyes. The warm atmosphere feels like a forgotten home. She wonders if this is what true happiness is. But stay with me. The silence of the city is about to be shattered by a massive explosion. Julian grabs Lily and sprints as Serafina leads the way. Archers begin firing from the stone rooftops. A man snarls that his fat lamb escaped, ordering Team 2 into action while wondering how they uncovered his scheme. Furious, he warns his men that failure means facing the king's wrath. They have to act now. Running hard, Julian asks Serafina how much further. She shouts that they are almost at the extraction point. They leap across the rooftops. Julian realizes Serafina has more steel in her soul than most soldiers. I know what you are thinking. This looks like a mess, but Julian has it all under control. They had met a black market dealer. Julian bought a rare mana crystal device and some spare parts. The merchant tallied the cost, demanding 20 gold crowns for the entire haul. As they left, Julian felt eyes on them. His alchemical enhancement had sharpened his senses, not just his hunger. Serafina tells him to stay focused. The plan comes first, and the dangerous crossroads is just ahead. She explains the crossing ahead is a dangerous trap, so they must be cautious while she checks it out first. It is far too quiet. High above, hidden killers watch their every move from the shadows. Sensing the trap, Serafina prepares the group. She tells Julian to grab Lily and Bolt when she signals. You and I just saw the comm. Now, trust me, the real fight starts here. All right, let's dive in. Even with alchemical enhancements, carrying a body felt heavy. Sarah tells him to prepare for a bloody fight. She asks if he can still stand. Arthur says he's fine, struggling to his feet while asking why they couldn't just burn the monsters. All right, stick with me because this escape is about to get bloody. Serena tells Julian to keep his cool since they only want his gold. The marauders are closing in. Their scout thinks his boss chose easy targets, even though these two fat lambs have been running hard. They track them down easily, but the couple has clearly taken divine elixirs. Even the outlaw leader can't afford that kind of power. He figures they'll be captured soon since they're cornered in the ruins. But just as they move in to seize their prize, one of the men takes a bolt to the skull. Inside the ruins, Julian and Serena are raining fire down on the terrified outlaws. The The boy laughs, shouting they're all dead, but Serena tells him to actually aim before pulling the trigger. It's not a game. Julian apologizes, blaming a habit from playing Battle of the Realms. Meanwhile, Alara hides in terror as Serena takes a stance. The bandit leader realizes they're pinned down. If they don't move now, they're finished. He screams for their reinforcements to arrive quickly. Suddenly, a heavy war wagon rolls up. The gunner unleashes a rapid-fire ballista, tearing through the walls around our heroes. Serena knows they're outmatched and orders Julian to retreat through the tunnels while she covers the rear. He tells her to survive. The girl dodges the heavy bolts with ease. The leader orders his men to stop firing since the boy escaped into the dark. Watch this closely. Things are about to go south for the bad guys. The gunner dares her to come out and have some fun. Suddenly, a bolt pierces the man's throat. Fire erupts again as Serena tosses an alchemist bomb right into the middle of the bandits. She uses the explosion to vanish into the catacombs. Inside, Julian tells Alara to jump, promising he will catch her safely. The girl leaps and Julian catches her. As he sets Alara down, she worries if Serena will make it out of there. Julian reassures her that Serena is fine. After all, she was the legendary warrior who captured him without breaking a sweat. While they talk, Alara notices they've entered the old sewers. Julian explains he found this hidden route on an ancient parchment map. The entrance in the ruins led straight here. It was sealed shut by debris, but Serena had cleared it out earlier. Serena suddenly drops into Julian's arms. He jokes about her almost hitting her head, but she knew he would be there. She simply smiles, saying she trusted him to catch her. Above them, the bandit leader screams for his men to find them. Serena tells Julian to stop moving, assuring him they're safe for now. The bandits won't be able to track them down here. She tells him it's time to let go. She had already planted fire gems in the ruins above, and now it's time to blow. Julian hesitates, wondering if he should really kill them all. But he realizes these monsters deserve no sympathy for their crimes today. One outlaw shouts that he found something. The leader sneers, declaring they'll have their fun with the woman once they drag her out. However, the tunnel hatch is locked tight from the inside. The leader realizes they're underground and demands someone fetch a heavy ram. Suddenly, the fire gems Serena planted begin to glow bright red. The countdown is over, and the trap is finally set. You and I both know revenge is sweet, and here it comes. Julian hits the trigger and the entire fort vanishes. As they walk deeper into the dark, Serena asks Julian if he's afraid. He says the mercenaries didn't scare him, so why this? Julian notes that once the mercenary guild finds out their men were slaughtered, they'll come looking for blood and revenge very soon. Serena admits they might attack if they show up in the High District, but she doesn't care since they have other allies. Serena says it doesn't matter since they have other places to trade. Wiping out the guild wouldn't be very difficult anyway. Julian thinks he's stuck with a violent maniac. Suddenly, Alara jumps, startled by something moving in the shadows near her. The darkness is hiding something. Julian calms her down, promising that as long as she stays close to him, she'll be safe. He vows to protect her. Serena laughs, asking the boy how many outlaws he actually killed back there. He proudly claims he took down at least 2. Serena teases him, saying he's lying and probably only wounded them. Julian snaps back that making them unable to walk is enough. Alara smiles at their bickering. Julian then remarks how sturdy these tunnels are. Back in his capital, everything would have collapsed. He didn't expect the stones to hold after such a blast. Serena explains the Old Kingdom spent a fortune on these foundations. The exit should be just ahead, but suddenly, Julian's heart begins to race. He feels a cold presence lurking in the dark. He tells Serena to stay behind him, sensing danger. Before they can react, bolts fly out from the darkness towards the group. Serena moves fast to save them, but a bolt grazes her arm. She bleeds, telling Julian to be careful of the dwellers here. Julian is horrified, realizing she got hurt protecting him. People actually live down here in the dark, and they aren't friendly. Serena tells Julian and Alara to run while she holds the line. Shadow beasts begin to emerge from the damp sewer walls. But Julian refuses to leave her side. He won't abandon her. He begins to strike down the creatures with a new fury. Julian is finally stepping up. He realizes he can't even protect his woman if he runs, so he pulls out his weapon and shoots. And trust me, you and I are about to see what he's really made of. Thinking he's useless if he can't protect his lady, he levels his arcane pistol. He fires at the beasts, vowing to leave immediately. All right, you and I are about to see what happens when you touch a knight's lady. Arthur is out for blood. Arthur tears through the beasts with his bare hands, as Lady Serena sends Alina to track his reckless, violent path. After the slaughter, Arthur collapses from exhaustion, but one mutated beast still breathes and lunges for his wounded leg. The creature drives a rusted blade deep into Arthur's chest, just as Alina's arrow pierces its skull from afar. Before he can even thank her, the light fades from Arthur's eyes and he falls into a deep, dark slumber. Awakening the next dawn, his mind is a blur. Alina enters with a basin of water to soothe his fever. Serena checks his wounds, while Arthur insists he is fine, though his stomach demands a hearty, warm breakfast first. His last memory is of the Blackwood mercenaries hunting them through the sewers, surrounded by mountains of rotting corpses. Even now, the stench of death from the underground tunnels clings to his skin like a heavy, suffocating shroud. Serena tells him to forget the horror, explaining those creatures were cannibals, true outcasts that even the monsters despised. Arthur realizes he must venture out for a month to gather supplies from the distant, safe kingdoms once again. Serena agrees, but warns him to return quickly, while Arthur just smiles and digs into their morning feast together. Later, Serena explains that his blind fury was an alchemical rage, a dangerous state triggered by those forbidden war potions. Now pay attention, because these potions twist a man's very soul. Some have even grown extra heads from the corruption. Arthur is horrified by the risk, but Serena assures him the chance of such a gruesome mutation is incredibly low. However, some gain gifts. She reveals her own scars, miraculously healed because of her rare gift of resilience ability. But every gift has a price, and using it drains the soul. Arthur must learn to guard his inner strength. His power is fueled by raw emotion, causing his very life force to burn through his veins like wildfire. It is safe to practice in the castle gardens, but the chaos of the battlefield offers no such mercy. Arthur realizes that if Alina hadn't arrived in time, he would be nothing more than a feast for crows. Serena promises that with enough training, he will master this beastly power and call upon it at his will. She hands him an enchanted mana bracelet, explaining it will inject the alchemical catalyst whenever he truly needs it. He packs the gold bullion into his rucksack, promising his companions that he will find his way back soon. He leaves them enough enchanted rations to last 6 months, ensuring they won't starve while he is away. Let's take a second here. Even in this hellscape, seeing the young girl's hair braided by Alina is pure peace. He reminds them to eat the fresh herbs from the garden, rather than relying solely on their preserved iron rations. Alina suddenly pulls him into a kiss, teasingly demanding he say something romantic for once in his life. Even the young ward gives him a sweet goodbye kiss, leaving our hero stunned by her sudden, bold affection. Alina looks annoyed by the girl's move, but Arthur just laughs it off as he prepares for the journey. With a final promise to return in a few days, he steps out into the cold, unforgiving morning air. As the gate closes, Arthur tells them there is no need for a long, tearful goodbye at the threshold. A moment later, he is back in the safe world. The clock showing it is barely 11 in the morning. It seems the time in that cursed wasteland flows perfectly with the clock of this peaceful, civilized kingdom. The constant thunder of gunpowder and screams would have shattered his mind if he had stayed any longer today. But now, he can finally hear the sweet, nostalgic sounds of the city streets once again, and it is beautiful. As he leaves, Arthur tells the ladies they don't need to watch his departure, soon returning to his own home. He notes it was nearly 11 when he left, the flow of time in that wasteland matching his world's clock. The gunfire and chaos could have shattered his mind if he had stayed in that hellish place any longer. But now, he finally hears that nostalgic sound again, the peaceful hum of a civilized world he deeply missed. He celebrates this tranquility, but quickly gets out of bed realizing he still has massive amounts of work to do. His dream is coming true as he nervously begins weighing the pile of gold bars he brought back with him. He discovers it totals 35 kilograms, left astonished by the sheer mountain of wealth he is now holding. Arthur wonders if this fortune is enough to buy a grand estate, a noble title, or perhaps much more. He dreams of owning a luxurious mansion, knowing he still has a bank full of gold waiting for his return. And trust me, you and I know he will return to that dark place for the gold still waiting there. Stick with me. You are about to see how Julian handles having two beautiful ladies waiting while he plans his next move. He realized overthinking was useless. For now, he just needed to live in the moment and find a decent place to eat. A massive meal was a must. He needed all his energy to sell off that mountain of gold and finally start living large. He dreamed of a massive estate and an enchanted carriage. Honestly, he could make it happen because his luck was finally turning. There was an entire vault of gold just waiting for him. He would use the coin to gear up before returning to that wasteland. But right now, it was time to enjoy the small things and relax, just a quick breather before taking on the next big challenge. Now pay attention. Julian pulls out a magic pen, a piece of technology that looks totally out of this world. He figured they could kill time with it. A shady merchant had told him it was loaded with hundreds of illusion plays. Only the best movies were on there. He had always wanted to try out this futuristic magic, so why not start right now? As the projection flickered to life, the sound boomed through the air. Julian immediately turned bright red, looking completely and utterly mortified. The content was intense. He realized these were not normal plays and finally understood why that merchant had such a creepy, depraved grin. In his past life, he probably would have been glued to the screen. But now, he liked to think he had finally grown up. He was an evolved man now, no longer the lonely hermit he used to be. Those childish things just did not interest him anymore. As he walked, a wave of nostalgia hit him. This kingdom was so different from the gray, ruined wasteland he had just escaped. Everything here was vibrant and full of life. He knew he had to unwind, or the stress of surviving would eventually break him. You and I know that feeling, right? Suddenly, he spots a small cat and realizes how long it has been since he saw something normal. Finally, a normal animal. The mutated pests in the wasteland were absolute monsters, some even larger than the biggest hunting dogs. He wondered if the cats here were the same. If he could just turn his gold into crowns, he would never have to worry. But without any paperwork, the royal banks would probably throw him in a dungeon. A private jeweler guild was a much safer bet. He needed a place that would not ask too many questions. He spotted a high-end shop across the street and decided to try. Stepping inside, a polite clerk approached him, asking if he was looking for a beautiful engagement ring for his lucky lady. She boasted about their massive collection, but Julian cut to the chase. He asked if they were currently buying raw gold bars. She said they did, but only if the purity was top tier. High-quality stuff only. Anything less would not even be worth their time. Julian immediately asked to speak with the guild manager. This kind of deal was way above a simple clerk's pay grade. The woman hesitated, eyeing his dusty travel clothes and heavy pack. She could not believe this commoner was carrying that much treasure. A moment later, the manager arrived and nearly choked. He could not believe his eyes when he saw the sheer weight of that pack. He asked for Julian's name and led him to a private room. After a quick inspection of the gold, the manager's eyes widened. The weight was 7,122 grams. Looking at the color, this was pure, high-quality gold. It was flawless gold. The manager looked up, clearing his throat, and curiously asked if Julian happened to have any more. Julian admitted he was short on cash. The manager dismissed the other staff, needing total privacy to discuss the origin of the gold. He noted the bars looked unique and questioned where they came from. Julian claimed they were minted in a very distant kingdom. He insisted the source was legitimate, claiming it was just payment for a job. The manager looked at him with newfound respect. He assumed Julian was some high-ranking mercenary or knight. In 20 years of business, he had never seen anything quite like this. No one just walks in with a backpack full of gold. Julian leaned in and asked if they were going to make a deal. The manager was definitely interested, but warned him not to rush. Without official royal papers, things could get very complicated for them. That is when Julian started crunching the numbers. He told the man to take a generous cut for himself to ensure a smooth deal. He offered the manager a massive bribe. Since the current rate was 270 per gram, it was a huge deal. The manager could not refuse an offer that good. He nodded, asking if Julian wanted payment in cash or a bank deposit. A little while later, the transaction was complete. Julian checked his account to confirm the massive fortune had been deposited without a hitch. Everything was perfect. As he stood up to leave, the manager bowed politely, urging him to travel safely on his way out. He handed Julian his personal guild card, hoping for future business. Julian realized that once you have money, the whole world bows down. You are everyone's boss when you are rich. Who would have thought a high-end guild manager would speak to him with such respect? But as Julian left, the manager's mind started racing. He wondered if he should send a few knights to follow the young man. Anyone who sells gold that casually must have a secret mountain of it stashed away. For now, he decided to just wait and watch. That is where we leave it. As Julian hops into a carriage, the driver asks what he will do with all that new wealth. All right, you and I are about to see a commoner climb the social ladder like an absolute king. The coachman laughed, thinking the boy was just a poser for paying with a few copper sovereigns. They reached Highcrest, and Julian, acting like a true duke, handed over a gold coin and told him to keep it. Watch closely, because this is where the former servant finally tastes what it feels like to be truly elite. Julian knew he needed fine silks. To stand out among the nobility and secure high-stakes deals, he had to look the part. First impressions were everything for a man of his ambition. It was time to trade rags for the finest royal raiment. He stepped back into the very boutique where he once scrubbed floors, declaring himself a patron this time around. There was no better feeling than showing off in the very shop where he used to be treated like dirt. He wanted to see the look on the master's face who fired him. Julian planned to buy every expensive cloak in sight. Something felt off in the shop, but he ignored the strange vibe to focus on picking out his new wardrobe. The head stylist watched in shock. Despite his age, Julian carried himself with the grace of a born emperor. She tried to use her charms on him, but Julian just wanted the bill for every piece of stock they had. He told them to tally everything up. He was taking the entire inventory home with him that very afternoon. The girl thought he was joking. The price was thousands of sovereigns. Surely this had to be some kind of prank. Julian assured her he was dead serious. He pulled out his enchanted gold plate to settle the massive account. He explained he once worked here just to pay for the academy, but now he was back to flaunt his wealth. He specifically wanted to make a certain mistress pay for how she treated him. It was purely about justice. That woman had made his life a nightmare. While the stylist packed his silks, Julian asked for the manager. She told him the guild master was at the Citadel today. She asked if Julian was unhappy with the service. Julian mentioned he was looking for Mistress Sarah to settle an old score, but the girl corrected the name. The current manager was actually Lady Courtney. Julian realized his mistake and tried to play it off coolly. The stylist then remembered that the previous manager, Mistress Sarah, had indeed been dealt with quite harshly. Sarah had been fired and sent to the capital's main office for retraining after failing her duties. She was now just a low-level worker at the imperial headquarters. Julian processed the news while heading to change. Now, pause for a second. You and I can see that even with all this gold, something feels empty. He realized this lifestyle was pulling him away from the real world, affecting his mind more than he expected. He shook off the feeling. He had a kingdom to conquer and far more important matters to attend to. Julian left the boutique in his new robes, telling them to give the leftover clothes to the city's poor. Next, he hit the most elite barber in the capital. He had no appointment, but demanded a chair anyway. He made it clear that gold was no object. He wanted the most expensive royal treatment they could offer. As Julian lay back, the staff hurried to call their most legendary stylist to handle such a prestigious guest. A girl named Juliet arrived, greeting him with a bow and a polite smile that lit up the room. Julian took one look at her and thought she was a solid 8 out of 10 in the beauty department. Juliet told him to relax and asked if he wanted to listen to some soft lute music during the session. It was incredibly peaceful. Julian felt his gold was well spent, while Juliet couldn't stop staring at his handsome face. She was completely smitten by his striking appearance. Julian truly looked like a young hero from the legends. She checked the water temperature carefully, apologizing for the slightest chill as she began to wash his hair. Julian requested a formal, noble cut. He needed his hair to match the powerful aura he now carried. After finishing, he paid with a gold card. As he stepped outside, every lady on the street was staring. Walking the capital alone felt a bit strange. All his friends from the academy had returned to their own fiefdoms. He was the only one left in the city. It had been years since he had spoken to any of them. He spotted a ladies' gown shop and wondered if he should pick out something fine for his friend Joanna. He decided against it. A man shopping for dresses alone might look a bit out of place in this district. He wished Joanna was there to stroll through the royal gardens with him. They could have lived such a life. And that is where we leave it for now. Trust me, you and I are going to want to see his next move. Let's dive in as our hero Arthur tests his luck after gaining powers and heads to a tavern for a feast. He paid his tab and gazed out at the royal coast, realizing he had spent the whole afternoon wandering the sands. Feeling exhausted, he finally understood why this shore was the kingdom's pride. During his 4 years at the Royal Academy, he only visited the coast once. His fellow knights always spun wild tales about the stunning maidens found here. They claimed the women were breathtakingly beautiful, but Arthur saw no such thing. The place was deserted and honestly quite dull. It was a letdown to travel this far for nothing. From the 1,000,000 gold sovereigns he secured this morning, he barely spent 200,000. He realized he was now the type of wealthy noble he once despised, though he couldn't brag yet. 1,000,000 wasn't even enough for a manor. Still, he had a secret vault of gold worth more than any royal treasury. The thought of it thrilled him. He wondered what other riches were hidden in those dangerous, fallen dimensions he could visit. But selling too much would crash the market, which was a massive risk. The gold from the Imperial Bank was plenty. Besides, he had other ways to build a fortune, like the enchanted quill he brought back from the other world. If he started a guild to mass-produce this relic, its value would explode. We are talking about billions in gold. Other magical systems he discovered were just as valuable, but then he realized he needed to stop dreaming and get focused. If he dropped all this high magic at once, it would bring the wrong kind of heat before he was ready. Now pay attention. The best move was to quietly grow his wealth and stay completely off the radar of the nobles. It was smarter to save the grand schemes for later and simply enjoy life with the fat purse he had now. Suddenly, a woman approached Arthur, asking if he wanted to spend the night. Looking at his fine silks, she smelled gold. She was stunning and figured she could easily wrap a rich young noble like him around her little finger. Arthur was even more handsome than she first thought. Standing up, our hero gave her a polite but firm smile. He declined her offer and told her to save her beauty for someone her own age. He had standards, after all. He added that his lady was far more beautiful than her. The woman was left fuming as Arthur walked away. As he left the tavern, he thought the whole scene was absurd. Any onlooker would probably think he was a total fool. It was dark now, so he headed home. Meanwhile, Lady Alara was a top student of trade at the Royal Academy. With her striking looks and sharp mind, she was admired by many. She finished her 4-year degree with the highest honors. But family troubles forced her to delay her dreams of higher titles. She settled for managing a high-end tailoring guild instead. Thanks to her incredible skill, she quickly became the manager of the most successful boutique in the entire coastal region. It was the perfect stage to test her grand ambitions. Her career path felt exactly like something out of a hero's legend. Once she took charge, she launched a series of reforms that sent the guild's profits soaring to legendary heights. However, her iron fist rule earned her a chilling reputation. Everyone in the city knew her as the Cold Ice Lady. Despite her success, rumors spread that she had a lover who adored her, but Alara only cared about reaching the top. She never paid the poor boy much mind. Naturally, she became the target of jokes among Arthur and his crew. They teased her, saying she always looked like she had just swallowed a lemon. They didn't realize who they were mocking. When these insults finally reached Alara's ears, she started a quiet investigation to find the culprit behind the rumors. You saw that too, right? Our hero was about to face the consequences. She began picking apart his every flaw. Slowly but surely, Alara forced Arthur out of the job he held for a year. He was left completely baffled. After a long night at the tavern, he decided to let it go. He moved on from the whole incident. He accepted that a manager like Alara didn't need a low-born worker like him to keep the shop running smoothly. But the story didn't end there. Talent is one thing, but for the people working under Alara, personality mattered more. Her unpopularity grew fast. More workers began to rebel against her orders because being a tyrant has its limits. Her harsh style brought quick profits, but it also built a mountain of resentment among the common staff over time. Extreme demands and low wages became a toxic mix. As the workers lost heart, the guild's service began to crumble. Despite being a genius, Alara was eventually fired because she didn't know how to lead people with a human touch. The woman who was once the untouchable rose of the academy suddenly found herself in the cold streets without work. Shockingly, her entire downfall happened in less than a year. Even though she was brilliant, it was already too late. So, what do you and I learn from this? Karma hits everyone, even the most brilliant minds in the kingdom. All right, you and I are about to witness the moment Alara's noble life completely shattered. Misery follows Alara like a shadow. Her lover confessed he never truly cared for her at all. He tossed wine in her face and immediately began flaunting a new mistress in public without feeling even a hint of shame. Worse yet, the coward used Alara's noble family name to borrow a massive fortune of gold coins. He bought a royal carriage to impress other women, while Alara slaved away every single day to pay for his greed. She spent every last coin on his debts, never realizing she was being bled dry until she was fired. That's when her world collapsed. In a kingdom full of talent, a fallen noble truly has nowhere left to turn. The carriage seat she paid for wasn't hers anymore. She considered the royal guards, but the debt was unofficial. The lenders were dangerous mercenaries, and she didn't dare provoke them. She was left with no other choice. She moved to a rotting hovel in the slums, spending her days doing backbreaking work for copper bits. Alara hoped to save enough to clear her name, but her luck was about to run out fast. Now pay attention, because a thug in a heavy leather jerkin has just arrived hunting for our fallen lady. He mocked her miserable life before declaring that she was coming with them on a very long journey. She told him to be quick. The man laughed, surprised a former noble was now selling common flowers for coin. He asked if she had saved the gold. Alara simply told them to stop haunting her doorstep every day. Irritated, the man asked how much longer she expected them to wait for their blood money. The man growled, giving her two choices: pay every gold coin now or surrender herself to the city's darkness. Alara asked if they intended to sell her off, but the man just laughed at her tragic situation. He claimed she was far too beautiful for that and planned to keep her before selling her off later. Alara went silent, as the brute reminded her that rules are absolute in this heartless kingdom of theirs. He told her not to worry. A few years in a brothel would easily clear her family's massive debt. After that, she could marry a peasant and leave the city forever, provided she stayed away from loans. I know what you're thinking. Where is Alistair? Well, he was nearby just 10 minutes ago. He was walking through the darkness, feeling incredibly tense as a mysterious couple passed him in the street. Without his alchemical elixirs to sustain him, he would have collapsed like a sack of heavy potatoes. Glancing aside, Alistair noticed a commotion and recognized the manager who had once exiled him from court. He stepped forward, asking the thugs if they wanted a taste of some high-quality mountain tobacco he had just found. The confused leader asked who he was. Alistair casually claimed he was just a wandering old acquaintance. Alara recognized Alistair immediately, wondering why on earth he was standing in this dangerous slum district now. Alistair asked how much she owed, telling the men to stop harassing such a delicate noblewoman. The leader mocked his boldness and tried to throw a punch, but Alistair moved like a shadow. He blocked the blow instantly, suggesting they settle this with words instead of their clumsy, violent hands. The man was stunned his strike failed. He then drew a sharp dagger to gut the young boy. But Alistair disarmed him in a blur, catching the blade and claiming it as his very own trophy. The thug reached for a pistol, but Alistair suggested moving to a private alleyway without any royal witnesses. Alara watched in disbelief, wondering if Alistair had lost his mind or if he was simply fearless. The group moved away, and Alistair told Alara to wait as he would return for her very shortly. Outside the alley, that group advanced on Alistair, who pulled a pistol, noting the total lack of guards nearby. He asked if he should use his toy, but the man scoffed, claiming the weapon wasn't even real. Alistair shot the other thug in the leg, proving it was real, and the leader finally turned desperate. He ordered his men to stand down, begging to talk things through and avoid any more violence. Alistair noted he'd suggested that earlier, but the man just wouldn't shut his big, arrogant mouth. With the pistol to his head, the man pleaded for calm. Alistair asked for the debt contract. Handing over the parchment, the man asked his plan, and Alistair replied he was paying the entire debt. And trust me, you and I are about to see Alara's world turn completely and utterly upside down. Stick with me, Lord Julian just pulled off a miracle. Everyone looked relieved as the gold transfer was finally complete. Julian realized he needed to stash the gold in his dimensional vault while his knight companion waited outside, wondering about him. Lady Sophia paced nervously, fearing something went wrong. When Lord Julian returned, she immediately rushed over to check his condition. He ignored his own safety, asking if she was harmed. Sophia offered to find medicine for his wounds, but he dismissed it. He told her not to look at him with such pity. After all, he was now the master of her family debt. It was actually a decent bargain, even if he had been a bit too lenient on her. He refused any cruel interest. The girl insisted on paying every silver coin back, interest included. Just then, her former employer shouted from across the hall. He didn't want any trouble with the high nobility. He tossed half his salary toward her as a final settlement today. He told her it should cover her debts and warned her never to return. Then, he slammed the heavy door shut. Lord Julian began to tease her a bit. She worried about her future, unable to keep a job for 15 days straight. She knew she would be hunting for a new position by dawn. Lord Julian asked where her journey was taking her tonight. Pay attention here, the story is about to get much more personal. She waved goodbye, heading toward her humble home. Lord Julian insisted on following, claiming his wounds still pained him. Soon, they arrived at the decaying, dark outskirts of the city. He was shocked that such ancient, crumbling apartments still existed in the capital. He wondered how commoners even managed to survive here. Inside her small room, he realized how strong she really was. Most people would have broken under this kind of heavy pressure. She was incredibly beautiful, but her struggles masked it. If she stopped being so harsh, she could surely find a better life. He caught himself judging her home, remembering he once lived in a hovel too. He cleared his head and stayed silent. She apologized for having so little to offer. She told him to sit wherever he liked. This was a first for her. She had never invited a man into her private chambers before. Lord Julian noticed the place was humble but perfectly clean. Even the worn-out chairs were spotless. She grabbed a small medical kit, intent on treating the wounds he had mentioned earlier. She moved closer with her tools, looking for the injury. Lord Julian felt a sudden rush of embarrassment as she approached. He told himself he wouldn't fall for her. She whispered for him to stay still as an awkward silence filled the room. She thanked him softly for saving her that day. He brushed it off, saying he was just a traveler passing by. Hesitantly, she asked if he still harbored hatred for her. He took a long breath and admitted that he still did. After she dismissed him from service, he nearly starved in the streets. He spent his nights cursing her name in anger. Even getting his revenge hadn't changed how he felt. He asked if she thought he only came back to mock her misery. Secretly, he knew that losing that job was a blessing. If he hadn't, he never would have found the magical bracelet. You and I both know that sometimes. A curse is just a hidden gift. This bracelet changed his entire destiny forever. The girl admitted she had reflected on her past failures. She realized she had been a terrible manager at the old shop. He told her she was skilled with numbers, but lacked heart. Empathy wasn't something you could ever learn from dusty books. You could study for a lifetime and still not understand people. He looked at the floor and saw 3 pairs of boots. He remembered she had a suitor and asked if the man would be jealous. She went silent, looking at the ground. Lord Julian guessed the truth. Her lover must have drained her coffers and left her in ruins before vanishing like a coward. That was why she lost her status and her home. He cursed the man, calling him a low-life scoundrel of the worst kind. However, she softly told him that the man was gone. He asked why she hadn't returned to her noble family estate. It was better than this slum, but she didn't want to be a burden. She chose to suffer alone instead. Lord Julian asked to hear her full story. Sophia finally broke and told him every hardship she had faced since then. She explained the failure of the store and how others mocked her. She spoke of her lover's betrayal and the threats. She wasn't looking for his pity, just a chance to speak. She was exhausted from carrying the weight of the world. That's why she was pouring her heart out to him now. Lord Julian told her she should smile more often lately. He added that her beauty truly shined when she laughed. Blushing deeply, she said that he was quite an interesting man. Now that she had finished, she wanted to hear his tale. He shrugged, saying there wasn't much of a grand story. Now that she was finished, she wanted to hear his tale. Lord Julian shrugged, saying there wasn't much to tell. He had simply started a trade business and made a fortune. Lady Sophia said she didn't believe a word of it. Julian didn't care. Trust me, you and I know she's the perfect candidate for his new Master of Coin position. All right, you and I are about to see a merchant house offer Seraphina could never expect. It all felt far too surreal to her, but the truth was coming for her eventually with no escape possible. Julian decided his best move was starting a merchant guild and naming her his chief royal steward. He could keep hunting for ancient artifacts, and she was the only noble he trusted for this. He asked how long it would take to pay her family debts by working in some garden. Since she was jobless, Julian told her she had no choice but to take the offer. Shocked, she asked if he really founded the guild, making her his new low-level servant. He teased her, asking if she hated working for him after being his superior in the past. Seraphina hesitated, lost in thought, before finally accepting the deal to join his grand new house. Julian welcomed her, hiring her to lead his artifact trade with a salary of 20,000 sovereigns. Seraphina was shocked by the massive amount of gold he promised. Julian added that his guild had no rules against the steward trying to seduce her new lord. Growing irritated, she demanded to know exactly what this new merchant house was actually all about. Pay attention here. Julian starts rambling about ancient magic and weird secrets that make no sense. He stopped himself, telling her he would be the master while she would manage every single detail of the house. The guild was still just a dream, but she could become the kingdom's wealthiest noble soon. Meanwhile, she grabbed a scrying stone to call the asylum, claiming that a madman was standing nearby. Julian told her to hang up immediately, warning that she would truly regret missing this opportunity in 5 years. He swore he was serious about making her the head of the most powerful house in 𝒑𝒂𝒍. She would get 20,000 gold coins monthly, and her old debts were no longer a problem. Her first mission was to register the guild, and the reward was 500,000 gold. In time, her pay would grow even larger. She asked if he feared she would just flee. Julian said he trusted her, and compared to her future worth, that gold was basically nothing. Serafina finally stood up and accepted the role. Now, Julian had a powerful ally for his plan. Since the deal was sealed, he headed back to his estate as the moon rose high. He asked for her bank records to transfer her monthly gold and keep the coffers full. He even suggested she find a safer manor, since the city slums were no place for her. He mentioned he would be traveling soon, but she suddenly called out and told him to wait. Julian felt awkward, wondering if she actually liked him, but he quickly dismissed the silly idea. Back in her chambers, Serafina felt embarrassed about how she had spoken to him that night. Later, Julian was relaxing at the Azure Coast, surrounded by beautiful maidens in the summer sun. He was thrilled to finally visit the southern shores. Life is short, and time flies by fast. You and I know that enjoying life while you're young is the only way to really live. In an enchanted carriage, the driver asked for their path, and Julian pointed toward the Grand Hotel. The trip was expensive, but spending gold here helped him return even more wealth to the other realm. He admitted the journey would have been far more fun if Serafina had come along. They arrived at the world's most famous palace hotel, and it was everything Julian had ever dreamed. A young lady led him inside, explaining that the magic mirror could summon anything his heart desired. Entering his royal suite, Julian felt pure joy as he dove into the shimmering private pool. It was his first time living like a king, and the feeling was absolutely incredible for him. He saw others celebrating and realized he had spent hundreds of thousands of gold in 7 days. He wondered how to spend the rest, but quickly focused on changing into his fine silks. Lying on his feather bed, he relaxed, knowing the quality of this palace was truly elite. With beauty all around, the only thing missing was a perfect bottle of his finest vintage wine to finish the night. But the wine tasted sour. You and I just watched Julian officially join the ranks of the royal elite. Stick with me. You and I are about to see how a simple, hungry man becomes a royal legend. As Julian dressed and admired his reflection in the grand mirror, he felt quite satisfied with his appearance. His magical device notified him of a new message. Grabbing the parchment, he wondered what news could have arrived. It was an invitation from the Prince of Albion and his beloved princess for a birthday banquet that evening. Later, Julian was already at the feast, analyzing the exotic dishes while the snobbish nobles whispered about him. He finished his meal, casually remarked it was delicious, and then asked the servants for a second helping. He glanced over at the royal couple, who were speaking excitedly in their native tongue near the high table. The princess looked stunning, but Julian did not care about their wealth and focused entirely on his steak. While the other guests groveled before the prince, Julian ignored the politics and remained engrossed in his food. He mused that these elites lived in a different world, surrounded by constant rumors of power and fame. Soon, a grizzled man noted that the venison Julian was eating was of the highest imperial quality. The man mentioned one slice cost 300 gold pieces, and that watching Julian eat made him feel uneasy. Shaking his hand, the stranger introduced himself as a knight captain with a very keen eye for talent. Now pay attention, because Julian immediately sensed that this man smelled like a massive amount of real trouble. The man claimed he was just greeting a professional, realizing he mistook Julian for a secret palace guard. He asked if Julian knew the royal security had their eyes on him, but Julian just shrugged it off. Julian asked why, as he was just a traveler. The man explained he was in charge of palace security. He only came because of his duty, but as soon as he walked in, Julian stood out to him immediately. Julian was a potential problem. Giving a signal to his fellow knights, the man told them to step back. He kept his eye on the target. Noticing the knight was still there, Julian asked why he had not left. The man replied that he had changed his mind, finding Julian much more interesting than the other boring guests. He asked if Julian could speak a secret code word in the ancient tongue, testing if he was a spy. Julian suspected trouble and kept eating, while the man began telling a long story about his past life. While the other nobles made grand toasts nearby, Julian remained focused on his dinner despite the constant chatter. The man finally asked what Julian did for a living, since he did not look like a typical lord. Julian casually responded that he simply earned gold to spend it, offering no further details on his work. When the man apologized for prying, Julian shrugged and mentioned that he primarily dealt in high-value gold. The man assumed he worked in the southern realms, noting that it sounded like a very lucrative opportunity. Julian corrected him, saying his business was in the eastern duchies, which surprised the knight captain immensely. He explained that he simply completed dangerous contracts in that region and was always paid in pure gold. Hearing this, the man looked skeptical, clearly unsure if he should believe Julian's strange tale of wealth. "I know what you are thinking. Why does this man keep pushing Julian for that secret ancient code word?" Finally, Julian finished his feast and looked at the man's seal, wondering why a knight wanted his contact. Suddenly, a beautiful noblewoman approached him, asking if he was alone since he looked so remarkably handsome. He confirmed he was unaccompanied and asked the lady how he could be of service to her tonight. She asked him to join her by the shore, and Julian agreed, needing some charm in his life. She asked if they could go to his manor instead, stunned by the sheer size of his massive estate. Julian agreed to take the green-haired girl home, and soon they were back at his grand castle for the night. Later, the girl slept soundly while Julian stood on the balcony, noting his physical stats had increased significantly. The effects of his alchemical elixir had finally worn off, and he knew he needed stronger potions to level up. He wondered about his old companions, but decided to forget them for now and enjoy his newfound freedom. He questioned if there was anything else he truly desired in this strange and magical world of power. The girl reappeared, warning him that drinking wine so early was bad for his health and stomach. Julian pulled her onto his lap, telling her to relax and share a glass of vintage wine with him. "You and I just witnessed a smooth move, but how has such a beautiful lady not been snatched up? All right, you and I are about to see how a royal vacation turns into a high-stakes power play." Sir Julian was back at the estate with Alara, who was busy sharing images of the luxury house just to make all her friends jealous. Julian warned her about a potential scandal, but she actually thought the drama would make her even more famous in the kingdom. She admitted that a bit of gossip would only increase her popularity among the high society of the eastern realms. Putting the gossip aside, she wanted to keep enjoying the day. Julian, however, felt like he was being used as a prop. Alara suddenly asked him to apply her tanning oils. Julian was annoyed since he just put on his finest silk traveling clothes. While they relaxed, a man named Thorn approached. Julian recognized him as a former colleague from the Royal Night Guard. Alara asked if they were close friends, but Julian kept it professional, calling him nothing more than a simple associate from work. She offered to give them space, but Julian said it wasn't necessary since he just needed to grab his bags first. A while later, Julian and Thorn were chatting. Julian wondered why a high-level security chief for the Prince of the Sands was visiting. Thorn explained that his master, Lord Robert, had overheard Julian earlier and was now desperate to meet him personally. Julian didn't want to waste his holiday on work, but Thorn mentioned that Lord Robert was swimming in gold and rare oils. Now pay attention, because once Julian hears about the hidden gold, his entire world is about to change forever. 10 minutes later, Julian arrived at the meeting. The guards announced that the guest of honor had finally appeared. Robert welcomed him warmly. Julian played along, mentioning he had heard great things about the legendary and wealthy merchant lord. Sitting down, Julian admitted the lord's influence was impressive. Robert credited his success to strong ties with the Eastern kingdoms. He introduced his new guard, admitting Thorne was talented, but perhaps a bit too friendly with the imperial crown spies. Julian asked if the trade business was truly that dangerous, specifically the rumors regarding his vast amounts of gold and rare oils. Robert chuckled, adding that he also helped clients choose heavy weaponry to protect their own private interests. Once you enter this world, you are marked by the crown, but this kingdom was currently a perfect sanctuary for them. Sadly, the fun would be short. He was soon departing for a small settlement deep on the dangerous southern frontier. Julian asked if they could talk more. Robert was fascinated by what he had heard of Julian's secret business dealings. He emphasized that his intentions were pure, having overheard Julian's previous talk about potential new trades in the Far East. He had always wanted to do business in those eastern lands, but most of the merchants there were still quite small. Julian asked for some specific examples. Robert questioned if Julian's business dealt in gold, noting the strict imperial laws. Large gold trades would definitely attract the crown's attention. Julian asked if selling gold in the Western realms was safer. Robert explained that his specialized legal team handled those headaches. Every problem has a solution if you have enough coin. To illustrate, he described how oil from forbidden lands becomes legal once it passes through his sanctioned ports in the south. By the time the shipment reaches the global market, it looks perfectly legitimate to even the most suspicious eyes. Seeing the logic, Julian began to believe him. It looked like a very powerful partnership was finally starting to form. Robert promised honesty, claiming he could move any amount of gold through his legitimate southern mining programs. You feel that tension too, right? It's the moment Julian realizes he is finally playing in the big leagues. Julian noted that the Lord seemed to know his kingdom well. He wondered if selling gold was truly safe. Robert replied that while it was a challenge, his team was expert at making small legal problems vanish into thin air. He gave a clear example of how oil shipments are legally converted into goods sold on the open market. If they move supplies through the southern sands, the shipments are eventually converted into something legally sold globally. Julian watched closely as the deal solidified. This partnership was exactly what he needed to grow his own wealth. The merchant reassured him that he was always honest. He could handle any quantity Julian provided. As long as the gold flowed through his specific mines in the south, the entire process would remain invisible. He assured Julian that he wouldn't have to worry about the details. Julian would only need to sell the gold for him. Robert would take a small 9% cut of the final total. Julian, however, didn't seem to like the price. The merchant thought 9% was fair, since such a massive enterprise carried a very high level of risk. To raise enough capital for someone buying that much gold, he needed a higher value than what was usually offered. The wealthy lord quickly reconsidered his terms. He was just about to lower his percentage to keep Julian interested. And that's where we leave it. Trust me, this dangerous alliance is going to shake the kingdom. All right, let's dive into this masterclass in high-stakes trading. Julian made it clear that transportation was the client's burden. He would only smuggle it into the kingdom, and the local payment in sovereigns would happen once the gold left his hands. Julian refused to be held liable for anything further. Despite those strict conditions, the man agreed and sealed the deal. He handed Julian a merchant's seal, saying once the shipment was secured, all Julian had to do was send a messenger. He even suggested opening a royal treasury account for discretion. Julian took the seal, hoping this gamble would finally work. The client asked exactly how much treasure Julian planned to liquidate to prepare the capital. Julian told him not to rush. Now watch this. The man's reaction is absolutely priceless. Julian mentioned the delivery would arrive by mid-July and weigh several tons. The buyer was floored. With a 9% commission on 3 tons, he would pocket 10 million sovereigns in gold. That kind of wealth is enough to keep any man awake at night. This was his one shot to become legendary. The man asked his elite bodyguard if this foreign noble was actually trustworthy. The guard admitted he couldn't say for sure. But he affirmed that Julian was dangerous. Watching his maneuvers, the man knew this noble was no ordinary merchant they faced. When asked if Julian knew the blade, the guard estimated that even as a businessman, the man was not weak. He wasn't a threat with a crossbow, but in hand-to-hand combat, the odds of surviving against him were 50-50. Afterward, the man suggested they stop by Alexandria while in the east. Outside, Julian walked with a very satisfied smirk. He was pleased with the outcome, feeling like he'd finally found a safe haven to move his massive hoard of gold. His original plan was to sell the gold in tiny shops, but that was far too slow and incredibly risky. This new option was the safest. Every single shipment was worth 1 billion crowns, meaning he had to move it fast. But now, he no longer needed to hold back. If his new contact could handle the laundering, everything would be perfect. He wondered how heavy the haul would be, considering even a small pile of gold would take up 5 cubic meters. Meanwhile, the lady from the docks was staring at the sea, complaining that Julian was taking forever because she was starving. Julian quickly suggested they head into the tavern. She noticed some rare seabirds and remarked how cute they were. Julian remarked that the harbor looked stunning under the moonlight. Seeing his face, she mentioned he looked unusually happy that day. Julian replied that he had just closed a massive deal. The girl was stunned, secretly hoping his mood was about her. The protagonist asked if she could even guess the value of the deal. She teased him, guessing maybe 1 million sovereigns. She lamented that even if he got rich, she wouldn't see a single copper. Julian just laughed, saying that was only part of it. He wasn't even certain of the final count yet, but the total he stood to earn was likely around 1 billion. You and I both know 1 billion sovereigns changes everything, and hearing that left her completely floored by his true potential. Julian joked that she had already inspected his potential before. Then, 5 very exciting days passed for them in every sense. High above on a luxury airship, Julian watched a maid serving tea and thought about how amazing this vacation had been. It was a bit of a shame, though. He didn't know if he would ever run into that girl again in the future. Sometime later, Julian was back at his estate, telling his assistant that he knew the client had been unreachable for days. He told her not to be so upset, promising to take her to see that harbor view on their next trip. She reminded him the Lord needs to show up occasionally. That afternoon, they would visit the workshop and the merchant house. The paperwork was organized and everything was on track. Seeing her dedication, Julian thanked her for all the hard work. He confirmed they would go that afternoon, but for now, he told her she could ask for any reward she desired. Scanning the menu, the girl felt overwhelmed by the choices. Julian told her to relax because he was paying for everything. He asked if she had been eating well while he was gone. Soon, the waitress arrived to take their midday orders. Noticing her worried expression, Julian asked if something was on her mind. She admitted the company's path seemed quite strange lately. Julian asked if people did not always say every new venture has unlimited potential. She argued that only applies with leadership. She questioned if he even understood the advanced magic they were commercializing, or if he still remembered those complex formulas. Julian laughed, asking who actually remembers those things after their studies. He said she could not use that as an example. Still, he assured her there was no need to worry about innovation. The plan for the company was already set. To start, they would develop tabletop games before moving into the enchanted device market. He then stopped as she interrupted him. She looked at him with a mix of doubt and curiosity, wondering if his wild ambitions could actually become a reality. And trust me, Julian's plan to dominate the enchanted device market is just starting, even if she has her doubts. All right, you and I are about to see if portable magic scrolls will dominate the kingdom's markets. Starting with the handheld market was wise. but they needed a solid foundation for the house to thrive. Arthur replied that steady progress was key, but they had to move forward with their ambitious expansion plans. He focused on Lady Alara, since she would receive 10% of the trade profits as her commission. Arthur mentioned he had just granted her that share, then noted the feast had arrived for them both. She was shocked because the deal hadn't even closed, yet the young lord was already splitting the gold. However, Arthur didn't seem bothered at all, simply enjoying his roast while planning his next move in silence. Later, as the meeting ended, Arthur lay on his bed marveling at Lady Alara's relentless, overflowing work energy. She moved between the forge and the capital effortlessly, ensuring that their noble enterprise was progressing quite well. Checking his artifacts, he realized it was time to return to the Forbidden Realm and began packing essentials. He needed to focus on the basics, noting it had been a long time since his last visit there. He had to see how his territory was faring, while a sky galleon drifted over the ruined post-apocalyptic world. The captain announced that Team 1 had reached the zone, immediately activating the magical life detection crystals. As the system scanned the barren wasteland, the man confirmed the primary target had finally been spotted nearby. Another knight confirmed the life signatures matched the building's records, ordering the first squad to strike hard. Now pay attention, because the blue-haired commander suddenly halted the attack, questioning what was hidden inside that tower. He announced the Black Rider Knights were hovering directly above, unsure of the strange magical situation below them. They requested maximum fire support from the command fortress, where the mages began preparing the massive arcane strike. A soldier reported the impact would occur in 60 seconds, urging the fleet to increase their flight altitude. A massive siege weapon was primed, and within seconds, the destructive projectile launched toward the unsuspecting target tower. As the countdown hit 0, the man realized that instantly vaporizing a massive building was truly terrifying power. He announced the kill was confirmed, but then something strange caught his eye amidst the smoke and ruin. In a sudden flash of light, one of their sky galleons was obliterated, sending the command tower into chaos. The captain demanded a status report, as the pilots screamed that they were crashing and needed immediate help. They were hit by a massive arcane pulse, leaving their flight controls useless and their ship plummeting fast. With adrenaline surging, the commander ordered everyone to jump before the entire deck exploded into a massive fireball. Activating their magical jetpacks, they leaped into the air, with the captain urging his knights to stay focused. A soldier informed the captain that the pulse came from the beast, and they had hit the crystal jackpot. The readings hit 9,141, meaning they would harvest them once the battle was over. A knight questioned the dangerous mission, noting that a higher crystal count usually meant a far more lethal monster. "I know what you're thinking," but the man smiled, explaining that high-level mutations eventually become quite harmless. Beasts with readings above 90,000 are considered safe because the radiation causes their cells to expand uncontrollably. This constant swelling consumes all their energy, making them look strong while they are actually dying from within. Suddenly, a soldier noticed something was wrong, as such a powerful mutant should have attracted hordes of scavengers. There wasn't even a single mutated rat nearby, and the beast was now aiming its energy directly upward. The captain ordered his men to fire immediately, realizing the monster was starting a massive self-destruct sequence. If it finished charging, they would all perish, but the creature suddenly exploded, vaporizing the entire strike team. Sir Owen reported the team had gone offline, and the crystal readings showed the target had split apart. The system now detected 12 distinct life forms, so the captain ordered the entire battalion to prepare for deployment. Meanwhile, Arthur noted the Forbidden Realm was still the same chaotic, beautiful mess as always. As he adjusted to the toxic air, he realized he still couldn't teleport other living creatures with him yet. Reaching the fortress, he wondered if this was the same mansion he had left just 1 month ago. Seraphina greeted him with a warm hug, and Arthur admitted that he had truly missed her presence there. She proudly showed him her masterpiece, having replaced all the gardens with massive stone fortifications and iron gates. And honestly, you and I are wondering if this is still a mansion or a fortress. All right, you and I are about to see Alistair realize his quiet manor just became a fortress. Seraphina explained it was defenseless before she stepped in. Alistair thought it was overkill, but Seraphina disagreed. This was their home, and they couldn't just hide anymore. Staying quiet wouldn't work if survivors started snooping around his secrets. Seraphina wasn't taking any more chances. He praised her work, then asked for Alara. Sophia said she was locked away, upgrading their magical artifacts. Alistair entered to find a total mess. He sat down, trying to understand what the young girl was building. Even with his basic knowledge, the designs were confusing. He walked over to her bed where she lay exhausted. He reached for a tome on her lap, but she suddenly bolted up, muttering nonsense before crashing back down. The poor girl was drained. She and Sophia had clearly been causing absolute chaos while he was away. He wondered if they had been hunting for ancient scrolls in those cursed, blighted lands. It was time to talk. Then Seraphina appeared in a stunning dress, inviting him downstairs. Alistair could barely keep his eyes off her. He teased that those silk stockings didn't fit her warrior vibe. She just smirked, asking if that was all. He suggested waiting for Alara to wake so they could have a proper family meeting. However, Seraphina suddenly tied him up and removed his shirt, claiming she learned this from the old libraries. Alistair was surprised she found him out, since she hadn't even caught his scent earlier. She leaned in close, asking if he had committed treason. Alistair just nodded, captured by her gaze. He promised to do anything to make it up to her. Seraphina just smiled, ready to show her dominance. She began to trace his chest, but they both remembered they had a child in the house now. She took a deep breath, declaring the intruder had been contained. She told Alara to keep an eye on him as she ran off, while Alistair begged to be released from his bonds. Alistair begged to be untied as Alara walked in, fascinated by the complex knots holding him down. Now pay attention, because Alistair is about to drop a massive secret. He sat them down, getting straight to the point, and finally admitted that he actually came from another world. He confessed he came from another world. Seraphina just smiled, admitting she had known for a long time. He demonstrated his strange powers, leaving Alara wondering if she was looking at a living god. Alistair explained he didn't pull items from thin air, but used a secret dimensional warehouse only he could see. This allowed him to store and transport goods from his world directly into theirs. He admitted he had already tried transporting other living things besides himself through the rift. Alara suggested the rift could filter out plagues from his world, which took Alistair completely by surprise. He realized his magical bracelet probably purified everything it touched, or his world would have been doomed long ago. He showed them the supplies he brought to trade for mana crystals and tools to rebuild their village. Sophia suggested the local survivor camps would pay well, but Alistair didn't trust them. He decided to head straight for Crown's Crossing instead. Even though the Iron Hand mercenaries were likely waiting for him. Alistair told her to relax, promising he wouldn't risk his life for even 2 minutes before vanishing into thin air. Teleporting was tedious, but it was the only way he could go alone to Crown's Crossing. By using his dimensional warehouse, he could easily bring all the goods they needed to trade. He planned to reach Crown's Crossing and use his hidden stash to flood the market with goods. Seraphina needed to stay to guard the manor since she was the only one capable. He suggested hiring more men to protect their massive lands, as they couldn't possibly defend it all alone. Since the estate was so massive, they couldn't defend it alone. Alara stayed quiet, asking if he didn't need her anymore, but Alistair just didn't want her to get too exhausted. Alistair assured her he just wanted her to rest. Sophia then warned him about the enchanted slave collars. You and I both know Alistair used to be soft. Sophia warned him never to remove the enchanted slave collars, and while he once preferred peaceful solutions, he was done playing nice now. He wouldn't hesitate anymore. Seraphina asked if the meeting was over, But Alistair insisted there was one final issue to discuss with her before they could officially finish for the night. Seraphina asked if the meeting was over, but he had one last question for the young girl. He asked if she was truly happy here. Alara was stunned that he even cared about her feelings. Alara was truly happy with her new life here. This was her real home now. Meanwhile, miles away, a brutal man laughed while pulling a young girl's hair in a cold, abandoned shack. The thug sneered that her family was dead and gone while his men looted their worthless shack. They complained to their leader that these prisoners wouldn't even fetch enough gold to cover their supplies. The cold leader ordered them to toss the girl to the blighted, since they were just dead weight. As the girl braced for death, a sniper bolt suddenly tore through one of the bandits' heads. The bandits scrambled for cover, screaming for their men to fire back toward the southwest woods. Stick around, because you and I are about to see Seraphina turn these bandits into mincemeat. All right, stick with me because you're about to see how Sarah's nightmare turned into a strange destiny. The warrior asks if Sarah will follow her, as she realizes all the cruel men have finally been slain. The knight sheds her helm, revealing they were just common slavers and Sanctuary 71 was never truly safe at all. The world beyond the walls is brutal. As they walk together, the woman shares a simple crust of bread. Survival meant clearing the blight and taking lives. She asks Sarah what her own path will be now. Sarah stays silent. The warrior offers a nearby camp, a place to start over, but the girl refuses. The woman wondered if the era of blood curses had truly passed, as the girl seemed so unchanged by it. Now pay attention to this. Without a goal, you won't survive 5 minutes in this hellish wasteland. Sarah finally speaks. She wants her family. Her mentor warns her she better hurry. Time is a luxury. Back in the present, Arthur asks what happened next. The truth Sarah found was much darker than expected. She realized her mentor was shielding her. There were no families left in the blight, only easy targets. It was a bitter pill. Even if she found them, they could never return to their old lives. So her mentor forged her into a soldier instead, teaching her every trick to stay alive in chaos. But her teacher was odd, a cold-blooded killer who wasted time on acts of kindness and mercy. The woman remained a total mystery, until the day she simply vanished into thin air without a trace. Sarah searched everywhere, but the whispers said she fell in battle. So, Sarah began her long, lonely trek. After crossing countless kingdoms, she confirmed the worst. Her parents were gone, but her sister, there was hope. No one could prove her little sister was dead, so she kept looking for their father's old manor. That brought her to this house, and trust me, this is where her story takes a wild turn. Arthur found her there, collapsed and starving after she had scoured the ruins for a single scrap. All she found was a fresh set of clothes, which she put on before waiting for the inevitable end. Just as her vision started to fade, a dark shadow stepped into the house, signaling her final moment. That shadow was just Arthur coming to save her, though he wonders why she's calling him a stalker. Sarah retorts that he simply took everything and made himself at home without so much as a word. Arthur realizes he needs to watch over her if he ever wants to find clues about her sister. Meanwhile, little Alara asks if she can help, but she's already found joy in her new family. Arthur smiles. Seeing her happy in this moment was more than enough for him to keep going. He remembers he needs her special skills, though, pulling out an ancient relic to show the girl. He asks if she recognizes this device. Her knowledge of old-world tools went far beyond this place. Sarah tells them to get to work. This artifact was the key to securing all their future supplies. Entering the girls' workshop, she warns them to watch their step around the glowing essence wires everywhere. Arthur is stunned. The house didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a mad scientist's lab. She asks to see the magic of his world. Arthur laughs, saying it's just a common handheld slate. The girl is confused by the tech. Arthur wonders if Alara never knew the games of the old world. Back then, people used massive capsules to immerse themselves in battles and legendary tales for hours on end. She explains that pre-war warriors played in virtual realms to sharpen their skills without ever spilling real blood. These projections allowed them to fight while resting, fighting off fatigue while their minds stayed in the game. Arthur realizes their mobile magic wasn't missing. It was just seen as primitive compared to those full immersions. He wonders if he should port his world's games to this advanced system or just give up entirely. The girl tells him to research all he wants, but the core technology was her domain now. She starts tinkering with the slate, mocking the ancient processor and the clunky touch-style runic keyboard. She scoffs at the ancient core, asking if it still runs on tiny physical memory shards and archaic gigabytes. A few hours later, she finishes, claiming the task was simple despite the ancient and limited logic language. Writing the scripts is easy, but the art and music, those aren't areas where she has any experience. You and I just saw his hopes get crushed, but not every dream survives reality. You and I are about to see how a master spellsmith can rewrite the rules of magic itself. Soon after, Alina remembers something and tells him to trust her, promising she will finish the task. She vows to forge it in under 5 days, leaving Julian stunned since he expected it to take months. Starting from scratch is a massive headache, but then she recalls a royal archive nearby that holds ancient lore. She mentions the great library of the Citadel, where old scrolls are kept, including blueprints for mobile artifacts. Since their database has endless historical records, they could find exactly what they need for this project. Lifting her up, Julian calls her the most precious gem in the kingdom, making her face turn bright red. As they head out, Julian wishes her luck while Alina begins organizing all the incoming magical supplies. Just as she finishes her heavy work, Julian sneaks up and grabs her from behind in a playful embrace. He tells her she did an amazing job, but she asks why he didn't help her move the crates. Julian admits he never expected her to haul everything to the castle's cellar so quickly on her own. Alina explains that these rations need proper storage, though Julian tells her not to worry about starving yet. Flustered, she says she brought extra gold sovereigns for him, which are waiting outside for his inspection. Now pay attention. A lot happened today, but Julian definitely hasn't forgotten her antics from this morning. He teases that she could scream until her voice fails, because no knight is coming to rescue her now. Later, Julian is perched with his magic crossbow, aiming carefully at a ghoul before pulling the iron trigger. He misses the mark and feels a surge of frustration, wondering why he only hit the creature's armored chest. He adjusts his aim higher and lands a perfect headshot, leaving Alina impressed by his sudden growth in skill. She tells him to stay focused, explaining how to calculate the bolt's arc based on the target's distance. She warns him to use common sense. Practicing on these ghouls is easy, but a real horde is different. If he ever faces a mass of undead, a single mistake could lead to a very gruesome and permanent end. While aiming her own weapon, Alina realizes his improved physical condition has finally made these heavy shots manageable. As the sun dips below the horizon, she calls for a stop because ghouls become far deadlier at night. Checking his stats, she sees 60 hits and 29 kills out of 120 bolts, an acceptable start. She declares he passed the trial, meaning he is finally ready to venture into the dangerous 6th district. She tells him to get inside for a feast, but Julian feels a heavy pit of anxiety in his stomach. You and I have to wonder, is he actually prepared for the horrors waiting outside those stone walls? The next day, Julian packs his bag with trading goods, keeping the most valuable items within easy reach. He tells himself to be swift and cautious while Alina watches him, still blinking sleep from her eyes. She begs him to wait just a moment, but Julian insists he will be back from the district quickly. He promises to return before she even misses him, yet she demands he stay for a final gift. Clara comes down the stairs carrying a heavy satchel, revealing something she spent all night crafting for him. It is a mechanical owl linked to his scrying stone, capable of scouting several kilometers in every direction. This little bird will be a massive help for his journey, though Clara is now completely exhausted from working. Watching her curl up on the sofa, Julian asks if she is worried about catching a chill there. He tucks a warm blanket around her, and his companion tells him he better start his journey now. Much later, Julian arrives at the outer rim, shocked that the trek took him 5 full hours on foot. He begins scouting a ruined manor, noting that the perimeter seems clear of any immediate threats or monsters. He spots a crowd of peasants lined up, while a blonde knight barks orders for them to be ready. The guard tells everyone to have their scrying slates out, while Julian checks his own device for the plan. He realizes his timing was perfect and moves to complete the next phase of his secret trading mission. Approaching a merchant, he asks for a storage stall, and the man hands him a formal lease agreement. After finishing the boring paperwork, the merchant tells him to bring his magical slate over for the final check. He leads Julian to a standard cargo vault and hands over the key after receiving 3 mana shards. Trust me, you and I are just getting started on Julian's journey to becoming the kingdom's greatest lord. Julian was thrilled that he hadn't drawn any attention while hiding his stash of preserved meat and biscuits for later. After stowing his goods, he headed into the royal district, knowing he needed to trade his wealth for some allies. Arthur had warned him against taking useless followers, so Julian needed to find skilled citizens with clean reputations to help. Stick with me here, because Julian's next move is to scout the inner circle for people who actually have value. Our main character seems to be inspecting the city defenses, wondering if they were hiding a secret weapon in there. A guard approaches, demanding mana stones and a clearing crystal for entry, while reminding him that no weapons are allowed. Julian strikes a deal to pass the checkpoint, while a young man thanks him for his generous contribution to the gate. Entering the district, he notes how different everything looks, but first he has to find a high-end inn to stay. After scanning the streets, he spots a grand building and decides that this luxury hotel might be the perfect choice. Inside, the clerk asks how he can help, and Julian boldly requests their finest suite, promising to pay for a week. The man is stunned, struggling to believe his ears as he offers a premium royal suite for the next 7 days. Julian doesn't blink, handing over 70 mana stones up front, confirming that luxury is exactly what he is looking for now. Meanwhile, an older noble named Alistair studies Julian's portrait, intrigued to learn that he might be a rare food producer. His secretary, Seraphina, offers to pay Julian a visit, but Alistair decides they should simply observe the newcomer for now. Soon after, Julian is seen enjoying a rare meal, thinking it was absolutely delicious, even if it was his last. As he eats, Alistair marvels at the quality of the food while Seraphina watches, wishing she could try some too. Later, Alistair finishes his meal, complaining that buying food in the inner circle has become nearly impossible these past days. Even at 60 mana stones apiece, people were fighting tooth and nail just to get their hands on rations. It was a tragedy that even when divided into 3 small meals, the entire supply would be gone within 1 day. Here's the part you and I need to watch carefully. Alistair realizes this young man looks incredibly familiar to him. In another room, Julian steps out of a magical healing pod, thinking the entire experience was absolutely amazing. The mana-infused liquid even had a massage function, proving that the high-tier magic in this city is truly incredible. It never ceased to amaze him, so he decided to explore the suite and find more magical toys to enjoy. He finds a magical table tennis set with a clockwork robot, accepting the challenge to teach the machine a lesson. Despite his Grandmaster-level skills from the Empire, Julian ends up getting a total beating from the clockwork machine. Losing 11-0, he wonders if this 7D magical illusion system is actually broken or just a scam. It reminded him of a cracked scrying stone from a street merchant that had finally given up the ghost today. Now look at this. Julian is suddenly transported to a bustling city, wondering what kind of madness he stepped into. Seeing the simulated crowds, he realizes the device is incredible, making everything around him feel as real as the world. The illusion shifts through different eras, from the Great Expansion to the Ancient Wars, leaving him breathless with wonder. He loved the 7D magical projector so much that he started considering ways to smuggle one back home later. He even saw mechanical golems, imagining how the common folk would go wild for them, since not having one is unfair. But something feels off, as he deliberately chose the most expensive inn yesterday to bait the biggest sharks in town. With the day nearly over, he wonders why no one has approached him, yet regarding his recent sale of goods. Just as he starts to doubt his plan, a sudden knock at the door echoes, catching Julian's full attention immediately. He quickly dresses and opens the door, revealing the noble from before, Lord Alistair, who had been studying his history. Julian asks who they are, and the man introduces himself as Alistair, accompanied by his personal secretary named Seraphina. Inviting them inside, Julian offers them a seat, while Alistair finds himself completely paralyzed by the sight on the table. Julian is casually snacking on fresh oranges from a glass jar, a luxury that hasn't been seen in years. Alistair wonders how long it has been since he saw real fruit, while Seraphina can only think about tasting one. Julian notices their shocked expressions and asks if they are just pretending to be surprised by his rare delicacies. He mentions that Alistair clearly did his research, and the noble admits that Julian's detailed registration was impossible to ignore. However, Julian suggests they put business aside, insisting that they should all enjoy some of this fine fruit first. He explains these are his company's specialty preserved fruits, confessing that even he has a massive weakness for them. "Trust me, you and I just saw a simple jar of fruit start a partnership that will change this kingdom. All right, stick with me. We're about to see how a few oranges can buy an alliance." Julian brought the fruit, leaving the man stunned. He served them with a smile, while the secretary asked in total disbelief if they could actually eat such a luxury today. Julian replied that they were freshly opened just for them. Realizing the weight of the gift, the man's hands began to tremble. As he took a bite, he found the flavor was exquisite. The sweet juice spread through his mouth as if his soul melted. However, he quickly regains his composure. Julian, seeing how much they enjoyed the feast, finally feels like he can relax a little. He asks for their honest opinion on the fruit. The man admits they were delicious, even if the Iron Quarter produces some crops. But those harvests are extremely small. It's difficult to grow anything, not just because of the blight, but the soil's unique corruption. Only a few can be consumed, while the rest rot away. Julian tells them that's exactly the reason why he has come. The man assumes the sealed goods at the Merchants' Guild were Julian's doing. He warns him that he's close to being a traitor. Julian mentions those goods sold for 50 sovereigns each at the guild, but he heard they sold them for 60 per unit. Summarizing this, Julian was hoping to strike a deal with their organization. He had been weighing the risks for a long time. Now pay attention here, Alistair is still surprised, asking if the boy has a stable supply line. Julian tells him to sit. Then the young man reintroduces himself as Lord Alistair Thorne, 10th seat of the High Council and president of the syndicate. On behalf of his house, he invites Julian's company to the Iron Quarter to discuss a formal partnership. Julian knew he'd found him. Later, our hero is practicing his aim with a high-grade repeater, following his mentor's instructions. Alistair asks what he thinks of them. Julian notes these weapons are far more stable than his own. He places an order for 40 repeaters and various types of grenades. Shortly after, the secretary hands over the trade specifications for review. While Julian checks the fine print, Alistair mentions their superior weapons. She wants to verify his registration to avoid any legal issues. Meanwhile, the president will brief him on potential population problems during the deal. Alistair then invites the boy to visit his massive forge. Julian thinks that being a high councilman was a very big deal, since not just anyone could own a factory that big. The secretary explains it was their main production line for magic weapons. They manufacture every enchanted blade and bolt here. Looking up, Julian asks what those strange objects hovering in the sky are. Alistair says they're scout golems capable of carrying 50 kilos and equipped with a self-destruct function. He tells him to look. Surprised, Julian thinks he should put on his enchanted lenses. Alistair then says that was their weapon testing field at that moment. The device is activated, but the man in the area doesn't suffer a single scratch. Julian is impressed by the magical shield. He asks if the man would give him some. Alistair mentions they had produced only a few and were currently updating them. They are constantly revising their designs. He suggests they continue, mentioning that this was the assembly workshop for the metal constructs. Julian thinks it's his first time seeing such futuristic weapons. He wonders how strong the monsters are to require all of this power. The director calls the hero, saying he knew he worked in the field and faced many dangers. He offers him armor. You and I both saw that coming, right? He gives him Aegis armor as a gift. It uses a mana vortex for protection. This creates a shield of high-pressure circulation. Across the room, a man seems to use a barrier to successfully block a shot. Alistair says that with this energy protection, he could withstand 4 heavy weapon strikes from their simulation. Julian is truly surprised. This is practically a personal energy shield. The man then asks if the boy was satisfied with what he had seen there. He responds that he was, but asks if the device had any limitations. The man says it consumes massive mana and overheats. Julian is stunned that Alistair is such a weapon expert, but the man says they should move to the most important point. Our hero wonders about the monsters ahead, while the director calls out to him, noting the dangers he faces in the field. He offers the Aegis armor as a gift. It works by pushing mana into a vortex, creating an explosion of protective, high-pressure air. In the testing room, a soldier activates the barrier successfully. He manages to block the heavy shot without taking any damage. Alistair says that with this energy, he could withstand 4 weapon strikes in their simulation. Julian realizes this is a powerful shield. It's practically an energy field. The man asks if he is satisfied, and Julian confirms he is, despite the device's limitations. Alistair explains it consumes massive mana and suffers from overheating. Julian is stunned that the man is such a master of craft. But it's time for the real talk. Alistair recalls the day he and his wife finally woke up after the Great War ended. He had been a chief engineer before the collapse. This allowed him to use the hibernation chambers to save his entire family. But the post-war world was nothing like they imagined. It was a ruin, the complete opposite of the paradise they once knew. They were left with nothing but the dust of the old world. Alistair had to build everything from scratch to survive the fall. And trust me, you and I are going to want to see how this tragic past fuels their new alliance. Stay tuned. All right, you and I are about to see how one man turns a group of broken refugees into a legendary empire. Some survivors sided with the tyrants, while others died to save their kin. The rest, they were sold like common cattle. One captive mentioned his skills were finally recognized, giving him a purpose. He thought he might actually have a chance to survive. He found it ironic that being a chief architect meant nothing. He was only chosen because he was fit for heavy labor. He became a simple laborer in a massive forge. Yet, in that misery, he found a spark of joy when his wife arrived. They were lucky to find each other in that hell, but their reunion was cut short when the guards called a routine purge. 40 people were gathered for a quarantine. In reality, this was a death sentence for anyone showing signs of sickness. Pay attention here, because this is the moment they mark people for death in a cold-blooded purge of the week. The man wondered why he didn't fight back. But in this sector, your life doesn't belong to you the moment you enter. He saw his wife joined by other women. He assumed they were being sold as camp followers, unable to grasp the true horror. Suddenly, he and his wife were tossed into a heavy carriage. It seemed they weren't the only families being moved that day. Everyone there had high technical knowledge. To their masters, they were useless, just extra mouths they didn't want to feed anymore. The carriage stopped. A man named Alistair began serving food, telling the exhausted prisoners to come down and eat their fill. The man couldn't believe the scent of fresh grain. He never imagined he would smell a warm meal like that ever again. A prisoner stepped down, wondering if this was a cruel joke. He questioned if this was just some twisted game by his masters. But the hunger was too much. They devoured the food, thanking Alistair for the first kindness they had seen in years. Alistair told them to skip the thanks. There was plenty for everyone, but if he caught anyone wasting a bite, they would regret it. His lieutenant, 𝒑𝒐𝒂𝒍, noted they used 1 kilo of grain with 2 pieces of meat and 3 cabbages. It was a feast. Alistair brushed it off as nothing. Now that they were fed, it was time for everyone to get down to real business. 𝒑𝒂𝒍 was annoyed by the young lord's casual tone. Alistair then walked toward the silent crowd to see if they were finished. The captives stayed quiet. Alistair told them flatly that if they wanted to eat tomorrow, they had better start speaking up now. The man finally spoke, saying everyone was full. Alistair knew they were all wondering what their future held in this new kingdom. "I know what you're thinking. Is he a savior or a tyrant? Well, he promises them a future they can't even imagine." All he asked was for them to prove their worth. In exchange for 3 meals a day, they had to show they were useful. Later, Alistair returned to his manor, exhausted. It had been a long string of meetings and constant hiring to build his power. Things were finally fine. The workshop was established, he had even hired some cooks, and everything was finally starting to come together. It felt like a jackpot, buying those specialists from Baron 𝒑𝒂𝒍. He then pulled out all the gold from his hidden vault. His neighbors were furious at the noise. Alistair simply shouted an apology, not really caring about the disturbance he had caused them. His communication stone began to glow. He figured it was just more messages from 𝒑𝒐𝒂𝒍, his sharp-tongued advisor, so he finally answered. But it was his landlord, furious that the tithes hadn't been paid in 6 months. The young lord didn't have the energy to argue. He realized it was finally time to leave this cramped place behind. He felt no attachment to the dusty rooms of his past. Without a care, he told the owner to find a new tenant and cut the connection. He was finally moving on. Then he reached out to 𝒑𝒐𝒂𝒍. When she answered, she asked if the great lord had finally decided to grace them with his presence. Alistair claimed he was busy with vital business. 𝒑𝒐𝒂𝒍 reminded him that their new enterprise was still in its fragile early stages. He knew she was a tough one. He asked if she would help him pick out a new estate, but she just hung up. He tried again immediately. 𝒑𝒑𝒂𝒍 was fuming, but took a deep breath to stay professional before she finally answered the second call. She demanded to know why he needed her to buy a mansion. Alistair explained that the magical artifact project was nearly complete. The development phase was over. Now, they just needed a few master craftsmen to review the final designs and polish the work. 𝒑𝒑𝒂𝒍 sighed, saying she would handle the mundane tasks like property hunting, just to keep her boss from making a total mess. After they finished, the boy knew no one was better for the job than his formidable former boss. It was time for gold. He thought about his contact across the sea. The man took a while to answer, which was strange given the time of day. He reached out to an old contact across the sea. However, the man took a while to answer, leaving Alistair quite confused. Alistair introduced himself and asked who he was speaking to. A voice finally answered, sounding rushed and completely on edge. The man said he was Nicholas Kaczynski and that his master was in deep trouble. He asked Alistair for his help immediately. Alistair agreed, since he was a close friend of Robert and had unfinished business. "Trust me, you and I need to see this." "Stick with me. You are about to see what happens when Alistair realizes his idle gold is a waste of potential. Trading all that bullion for cash would be a massive headache, and he really does not want to become a target. If the royal spies discovered his secret, he would be in deep trouble, so he decides it is time to travel. He had secured his travel scrolls years ago, and with his newly enhanced body, he would be completely unstoppable now. He needs to stash some funds first, so he tells Lord Elric they have urgent business to settle by tomorrow morning. By sunrise, the gold had been credited to his vault, and Lord Elric warns him to be careful on the road. As Alistair leaves, the merchant watches him go, sensing there is far more to this young man than meets the eye. He calls his brother immediately. reporting that he had tracked the lad history and found absolutely no lineage or house. The boy has no background, yet 𝒑𝒐𝒄𝒂𝒍 just pocketed 7,000 gold sovereigns from someone who might be a grave robber. He suspects Alistair found a hidden mine, but once this task is finished, the Black Hand Syndicate will finally be gone. The merchant smirks, knowing the boy is now in his grip, while elsewhere, a guard tosses bread to a starving prisoner. "Eat if you want to live," the guard growls. That prisoner was Baron Robert, a titan of industry who lost everything. Pay attention here. 3 days ago, his own informant betrayed him, leaving him trapped in a brutal bandit fortress. He watches as another poor soul is dragged off for execution, knowing that in this place, uselessness means a certain death. Robert is not shaking, though. This is not his first brush with death, having bribed his way out of trouble before. But he can feel it. This time is different, and the stakes are much higher for a man of his standing. If he had not been snatched, Sir Nicholas would not be in such a desperate position trying to save his life. No matter how legendary Nicholas is, he is just one knight against an entire army of ruthless and bloodthirsty terrorists. It is a suicide mission, but Robert refuses to give up hope and intends to resist for as long as possible. As he eats the stale bread, Robert thinks about how difficult it is to even chew this garbage. Alistair finally arrives. You and I both know this looks too peaceful, but Alistair is not letting his guard down at this border outpost. The driver warns him that even if it looks quiet, a sudden raid could happen. Peace is a rare luxury here. After stepping out, a man approaches him, skeptical that Alistair is alone. 2 men against a fortress is madness, he says. The young protagonist simply asks if Nicholas has any fresh leads on where the Baron is currently being held by bandits. They hop into a rugged wagon, and the knight confirms the location while Alistair asks if the gear is all ready. Nicholas points toward the back of the wagon, asking if the young man needs anything specific for the coming raid. Alistair says he is already prepared with his own tricks, and then they head straight for the enemy bandit stronghold. When they arrive, the knight tells the boy to stay low and move silently to avoid alerting any of the guards. Nicholas watches him, worried the kid's relaxed attitude will turn him into dead weight once the steel starts flying today. Alistair notes that the people in this war-torn area seem very sensitive to the smell of approaching battle nearby. The knight asks if he will really be okay, mocking that his Eastern martial arts will not help against heavy crossbows. Alistair decides to give the man a small demonstration, reaching into his spatial storage to pull out a massive weapon. Nicholas is stunned. He had not seen the boy carrying a weapon that size. Alistair just heads toward the building. He tells the man to focus on his own goal and not to worry, then grabs a small clockwork scouting device. The little machine zips into the sky and vanishes. Alistair taps his enchanted monocle to see through the device eyes. He checks the total number of enemies, reporting there are 14 men in the building, though 3 are currently unarmed. He tells Nicholas to stay back, because he can handle every single one of the terrorists inside the fortress alone. The knight decides to trust him, leaving his master life in the hands of this strange and confident young man. Inside, a group of bandits is gambling. One of the men grumbles and heads off to find a private bathroom. Alistair stalks through the shadows, thinking that the alchemical elixir he took was worth every single gold sovereign he spent. Through a window, he spots a man using the latrine and eliminates the target with one silent, perfect crossbow shot. Back at the table, a bandit realizes his friend is taking too long and tells the others he is checking. He knocks on the door, asking if the man is okay, but Alistair shoots him while hanging from the stone ceiling. 3 more left on this floor. One bandit at the table shouts that if he loses again, he will kill everyone. And trust me, you are going to want to see the look on their faces when Alistair finally drops down. All right, you and I are about to watch Arthur unleash some serious chaos on these bandits. He takes a breath and picks one off. The rest of the gang panics and fires at his position. Deep in the cellar, Lord Robert hears the sounds of battle. He wonders if the House of Arundel has finally come to save him. A bandit orders the guard to watch the captives, while the rest of them provide backup for the others outside. The guard has a terrible feeling about this. Suddenly, Arthur descends the stairs and challenges every single one of them. Behind the heavy iron door, the guard hears the clash. Moments later, our hero bursts in to find Lord Robert. Robert is stunned to see the boy. But then, a bandit grabs a hostage and screams in a foreign tongue. Arthur doesn't understand a word of it. He asks the Lord what this madman is actually yelling about. Robert translates the threat: drop the weapon or the hostage dies. Arthur realized they chose the wrong person to threaten. He wasn't there to save that hostage, but their life was now resting entirely in Arthur's hands. Now pay attention, because here's the part where Arthur has to make a life or death choice. The bandit takes his chance and fires as he approaches. He thinks he's won, but Arthur strikes back instantly. Robert hugs the young man, thanking him. He says that Eastern Kung Fu really helped him dodge those bolts. Arthur knows the truth. He only survived because of his 10-second shield. He'd faked the fall to lure them in. He waited for the bandit to let go of the girl. Now, they have to move because Nicholas is waiting. Nicholas contacts them through the stone. He tells them to hurry because the enemy is calling in massive reinforcements. The extraction point is clear, so they need to get to the carriage now. Nicholas has to cut the signal. The reinforcements are arriving fast. As they flee, Robert wonders what they'll do if they hit another ambush. Arthur pulls him into an alleyway. He'd spotted the enemy scouts through the eyes of his mechanical drone. Meanwhile, Nicholas is wounded. He tells Arthur and Lord Robert to flee the city and leave him behind. Arthur refuses to leave a man behind. He tells Nicholas to head into an alley at 6 o'clock immediately. Nicholas thinks the fire is too intense, but he takes the risk. Arthur uses his drone to guide him home. Once they reach the carriage, Nicholas admits he's lucky to be alive. Arthur warns they aren't safe yet. The roads are blocked. Robert suggests heading into the desert wastes to reach a safe city in the north. They have enough fuel to cross the sands. Arthur worries they might be heading straight into enemy territory. If he knew the mission would be this messy, he never would have accepted the quest from the guild. Still, he'd see it through. It was a perfect chance to test his new equipment in the field. What shocked Arthur most was the coldness he felt. He didn't feel a thing after taking another life. Suddenly, the carriage breaks down. The engine has overheated. Arthur can't believe their luck is this bad. Then, a truck approaches. Robert tells them to lower their weapons because they've finally been saved by travelers. Arthur thinks they look like refugees. Robert returns and says the driver agreed to take them on their journey. Inside the truck, Arthur notices how well his boss gets along with the common people during the long ride. But Nicholas has already fallen asleep. Arthur feels uneasy with everyone in the truck staring at him. Let's pause for a second. Looking at him now, it's hard to believe how far Arthur has come. None of this feels real. Not long ago, he was just another person waiting in a job queue. He notices a young girl watching him. Arthur walks over and introduces himself, following the local customs. Her name is Alice. Arthur sits down and offers her a packet of biscuits from his dimensional storage. Alice eats the food quickly, cherishing every bite. Arthur realizes she hasn't had a real meal in ages. He asks what she'll do next. She's heading to a camp to see if anyone will buy her. Arthur chooses to stay silent. It's a harsh world, and there are some things he just can't change. The next day, Robert promises the driver a visa and a job within the kingdom for his help. But suddenly, the truck comes under fire. Arthur catches Alice just before she's thrown from the vehicle. A group of armed men jump from their cars. They surround the truck and drag Lord Robert out. Arthur reacts instantly to save Alice, keeping her from being thrown out of the moving vehicle. And that's the moment where we leave it. Lord Robert is in serious trouble, and you won't believe what happens next. All right, you and I are diving into a story where Julian finds out these marauders are actually vile slave traders. Alara explains they raid villages, turning survivors into slaves, while the men are forced to either join or die. The young girl begs Julian for a single round from his flintlock, choosing a quick death over losing her dignity to those monsters. Julian refuses, but Alara simply prays for his success. Suddenly, a marauder fires a warning shot into the air. As they move to pillage the carriage, Sir Nicholas and Julian strike from the shadows, breaking necks with lethal precision. Julian vows to save Baron Robert, snatching a fallen enemy's blade to cut down the remaining bandits who dare to resist. The slavers open fire, but Julian is faster, activating a 10-second magical shield that deflects every single incoming strike. Desperate, the bandits try to seize Baron Robert as a hostage, but the old noble grabs a weapon and kills them first. Julian knocks out the last survivor before they can even blink. Nicholas rushes over to check if the Baron is all right. Now here is where it gets tough. Robert is hurt, their carriage is trashed, and they have to walk the rest. Julian looks at the helpless refugees, wondering what will become of them. The men can't even stand, let alone defend themselves. While Julian worries, Baron Robert insists they'll be safe at the next citadel, but for now, they are on their own. The Baron argues they should leave the peasants behind, claiming that their survival is simply not their concern in this land. With limited mana stones, they can barely reach the safe zone, but taking the refugees along would only turn them all into targets. The rest of the trek was strangely quiet. No marauders appeared, and even the desert storm seemed to spare them. But now, they had a new companion. After the Baron explained the situation to the refugees, Julian prepared to move out. Suddenly, Alara tugged on Julian's cloak. He stopped, confused, as she began to speak in her strange, melodic tongue. Julian asked Robert to translate, but the man looked awkward. Julian assumed she was just hungry and offered some rations. The girl shook her head at the biscuits, begging instead to stay by his side as they continued their long journey. Remembering her tragic story, Julian realized he could help her find a new life. He invited the girl to join them. Once inside the carriage, Julian asked what she had really said earlier. Robert sighed and finally decided to tell the truth. "Okay, you won't believe this. She offered to be his wife as a reward for slaying all those vile bandits." Julian turned bright red, while Robert joked about taking multiple wives. The boy quickly stammered that he wasn't even married yet. He figured things would get complicated, but with enough gold, he could surely solve any problems Alara might face later on. When they reached the city, Robert looked for familiar faces while Alara stayed on high alert, watching every stranger's movement. Julian reassured her they were finally safe, just waiting for the local lords to step in and settle the diplomatic matters. The girl remained quiet as a man named Blues appeared, asking Julian if he still remembered their previous encounter. Julian was shocked to see him. Blues explained he was now working as a guard for a powerful new master. His boss was Lawrence, a high-ranking detective from the Western Kingdoms, who was investigating Baron Robert for crossing a very dangerous line. Julian asked if it was wise to share this, but Blues just smirked and asked if Nicholas had informed him. Julian admitted that Nicholas only shared the basic plan before going silent. Clearly, there were many secrets being kept. Lawrence warned Blues not to leak secrets to outsiders, ordering Julian to accompany them back to the main headquarters immediately. Blues bid Julian farewell. Robert later explained that Blues was a mercenary who simply followed the path of the gold. This time, his master was chasing a promotion by dealing magical weapons in the borderlands, which was bound to anger some very powerful people. It was all a calculated move to avoid a massive royal scandal. He warned Julian to always watch exactly where the artillery was pointing. It was a dirty trade Julian wanted no part of, and meanwhile, Alara reflected on being 17 and born in a war-torn kingdom. When she was young, she caught fleeting glimpses of the outside world through magical mirrors, dreaming of a far better life. She once believed those peaceful, paved streets were just myths or dreams from a distant, legendary storybook. But she soon realized her own life was a tragic play, where innocent people died just to satisfy a villain's greed. Her parents were slaughtered by those monsters when they refused to bow to their demands, leaving her completely alone in the world. She spent years as a wanderer, running from the fires of war until Julian finally arrived to change her fate. He was the one who struck down the demons and saved her from a fate far worse than death itself. Julian never looked down on her, even though she was covered in the dust of battle. He simply took her in. At that moment, she knew it was time to repay him. Seeing him covered in sweat, she spoke up once more. "So, you and I are left watching as Alara decides it is finally time to repay his kindness in her own way. All right, you and I are diving into a story where one man's dream changes the world. It starts with Julian asleep. Suddenly, he grabs Alara's hand and pulls her close. She finds herself locked in his arms, stunned by the sudden heat. To her, this felt like the greatest blessing imaginable. But Julian had work to do as he prepared his return to Albion. Standing beside him was Alara, looking incredibly nervous. Our hero was sweating too, hoping his daring plan wouldn't fall apart just yet. Alara vowed to master the local language the second they landed. Meanwhile, a fleet of armored carriages began approaching them from the distance. Julian smiled, relieved to see familiar faces. He knew he owed his benefactor a huge favor for securing Alara's safety. After settling Alara's safety, Julian noticed a mysterious stranger in the back seat and demanded to know exactly who this young man was. The driver explained it was Sir Jean, the man running their logistics and currently in charge of Julian's personal security detail. Jean introduced himself as the head of trade for the capital. It turned out his master had struck a deal with Lord Robert. Now pay attention here. This is where the power dynamics shift. Jean noticed Julian was being unusually talkative during the entire ride. It was the longest chat Jean had ever seen from him. Usually, the man was silent, focused entirely on guarding Lord Robert's treasures. Julian realized Jean wasn't just a bodyguard. He was actually there to supervise the massive deal that was about to go down. This man was an elite overseer for international shipments. Julian gestured toward a nearby building, signaling that the goods had finally arrived. Julian told them to follow, but Jean decided to stay outside. He trusted Sir Nicholas to handle the heavy lifting inside. His men were already moving to prep the transport, but when the merchant stepped inside, his jaw hit the floor. He thought this dusty warehouse was just a meeting spot. He couldn't believe Julian would leave something so valuable in here. Julian explained that hiding in plain sight kept the thieves away. He urged them to move fast and start the reveal. As the heavy cloths were pulled back, mountains of gold bars were revealed. The group stood frozen by the sheer golden glow. But that was only the start. Julian remembered his own shock when he first saw a massive pool filled with gold. Now, you and I both know that's a lot of loot. The lead merchant finally barked at his men to start moving. They got to work instantly. Hours later, the merchant finished counting. He confirmed that the haul was worth a staggering fortune. The total hit $500 million. Once the payment cleared, his team would begin loading the gold into the secure carriages. Right then, Julian's phone buzzed with a massive deposit notification. The deal was sealed, and the wealth was officially in his hands. The merchant tipped his hat, calling it a pleasure. He vanished with his guards, leaving Julian alone with his new riches. Even Julian was stunned by the balance in his account, but strangely enough, he felt like this was only small change. He remembered telling his partners this was his final gold shipment. Once this hoard was gone, he needed a brand new industry. They had asked what his next move would be. Julian had simply smiled and told them he was conquering the tech world. Back in the present, he frowned. 350 million sounds like a lot, but it was nothing compared to future tech. Modern innovations would soon be worth billions. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Lady Clara, and she sounded absolutely terrified about something. She begged him to hurry over immediately. 90 minutes later, Julian burst into her apartment to see what was going wrong. She was relieved he finally showed up. She asked if he remembered the secure drive she'd sent, and Julian nodded his head. He asked if the new game had bugs. She laughed, saying the developer was a total genius and everything was perfect. The code was flawless. They were sitting on a masterpiece that would redefine the entire history of the gaming industry forever. But this was Julian's company. Even though Clara did the heavy lifting, she still needed his royal signature on every document. There were endless formalities he had to handle, but Julian was always gone, leaving her to manage the chaos alone. Julian told her to relax, promising she would be paid handsomely. Clara just sighed and told him to call next time. She didn't want him barging into her home again. He brushed it off, asking if she'd found a headquarters for them. Clara said she was working on it and had a major update on their new recruits and the company's overall development. Their first mobile game was already submitted for approval. Since it was clean content, they expected a green light very soon. She started diving into the technical details of the business. Julian, however, was clearly struggling to keep up with the jargon. He didn't understand a word. Clara warned him that if they didn't start turning a profit soon, the company would fail. Between massive salaries and expensive equipment, they were bleeding cash. But Julian didn't seem worried at all about the potential bankruptcy. He knew Clara had no idea just how deep his pockets were. With his secret wealth, this company literally couldn't fail. Clara insisted she wasn't joking. But seeing her passion, Julian decided it was time for a massive cash injection to help. And trust me, you and I are going to love seeing her face when she realizes just how rich he is. Let's dive in as Lord Arthur offers 10 million gold coins. Noticing Lady Claire's stunned silence, he instantly doubles it. He asks if 100 million would be enough, while Claire insists she was dead serious about her earlier warning. Arthur insists he is, and promises that tomorrow they will head to the Iron District to sign the royal deeds. Still, she hesitates, questioning how a common knight could afford an estate and why he would even bother financing it. Our hero wonders if she's playing hard to get. Meanwhile, in the Outlands, a massive ship crashes into a tall spire. A young soldier named Julian survived, but he lost contact with his captain while scavenging for a massive mana crystal. Now Julian is desperate, surrounded by the heat of a dying engine. Luckily, he had ignored the captain's final orders. Staying inside the armored transport saved his life, even though the rest of his squad wasn't quite as fortunate as him. His 𝒑𝒂𝒍 is completely dead. It seems a massive energy blast fried his internal systems while he was out cold. This pulse was so strong it even glitched his microchip, leaving him flying blind in the middle of enemy territory. Julian checks his gear. He only has 5 rounds left in his weapon, 2 flares, and a few dry rations. With only these scraps, Julian has to push past his limits if he ever wants to find his captain again. The lifts are dead, but the upper floors seem clear of the rotting walkers roaming the dark streets below. Now pay attention. Julian reaches the ground floor, but it took too long, and the sun is already setting over the ruins. He needs a survivor camp, or a safe house before nightfall, so he moves quickly while the light still holds. These monsters move slow for now, so his best bet is finding a path out of the ruins of the city. Looking at the wrecks, Julian realizes the evacuation traffic was heading toward the western suburbs. He has to hurry now. Elsewhere, a young girl waits in fear, wondering why her signal hasn't been picked up as the darkness creeps in. Julian spots her trapped behind some debris, and as she cries for help, he carefully moves in to check the perimeter. He wonders who would leave a girl out here as bait, but he knows he must be incredibly cautious here. Whispering softly, he tells her to stay calm, because he's there to get her out of that cage safely. As soon as he unties her, she hugs him with a wicked grin. Suddenly, 2 armed men step from the darkness. They level their rifles at his head. The scarred leader mocks him for being the month's first easy catch. The girl apologizes with a knife to her throat. She was just the bait for this deadly and effective trap. For trying to be a hero, Julian fell right into an ambush and was captured by a ruthless bandit crew. Back at the hideout, the thugs realize Julian is a gold mine. He's carrying high-tier military gear they haven't seen in years. They praise the girl's acting, while the leader prepares to strip the big fish of every valuable piece of tech. The bandit demands a name, and Julian tells him, but the thugs want to know exactly where he flew in from. Julian says he belongs to the Sky Guard of Londinium, but the bandit thinks he's lying to save his skin. When they ask about his ship, Julian admits it crashed nearby. The bandit laughs, asking if he's still acting tough. You and I both know Julian is smarter than he looks. He offers his advanced gear in exchange for his life. The leader just scoffs and orders him away while Julian spots the girl and realizes her former master failed her. Her previous owner was a complete fool who died in a trap, leaving her as a slave messenger for these bandits. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, Claire asks if Lord Arthur is simply trying to buy her heart with his wealth. Arthur acts confused, but Claire remains suspicious of his sudden business plans and the massive fortune he is throwing around. She tells him starting a company just for her seems crazy, even though she tried to ignore her doubts before. A real guild is meant for gold and profit, not for a knight who somehow pulled 100 million from air. Claire questions why he would take such a massive risk for her, especially after she caused him so much trouble. He even lost his noble rank because of her. She refuses to believe he did all this without a hidden motive. She refuses to be a trophy for the new generation of nobles who buy and sell companies like they are toys. Claire wonders if she's being tricked again, while Arthur explains that 100 billion gold is the real goal here. He assures her that 100 billion gold would be just a tiny fraction of the guild's future total worth. He isn't greedy. He just finds it boring to let gold rot in a vault instead of using it to build. He doesn't want gold rotting in a vault, and if she thinks he built this for her, she is absolutely right. And that's where we leave it. It takes a real genius to build a global trade empire all just for love. All right, you and I are about to see how a lord with 100 million gold crowns changes everything. Observing Lady Alara, Sir James notices her heavy silence and wonders if her pride is reaching its breaking point. He knows high lords are rarely as kind as their servants, but suddenly, the lady stands up with a glare. She demands James leave her manor immediately, reminding him of their heavy duties at dawn, so he better not forget. As he departs the estate, James notes her incredible self-esteem, but the next morning, he finds her eating scraps alone. Seeing her struggle hits him hard, so he decides he must secure a proper castle to solve this mess forever. After sending a raven to Lady Lyanna, he prepares to escort Alice to her ancient language tutor across the city. Staring at the massive stone tower, he questions if this is truly the right place to train a highborn girl. As they arrive, Alice bids her lord farewell, and James promises to return for her once the sun begins setting. With his carriage waiting, he directs the coachman toward the royal bank located in the heart of the trade district. The coachman asks if his lordship slept well, but James knows the cold woman beside him won't answer personal questions. She mentions the upcoming trials at the Grand Academy and insists that he must accompany her to oversee the recruits. James tells her they have bigger problems, specifically the gold shortage that is threatening to bankrupt the entire royal treasury. After discussing their gold shortage, James returns to the blighted lands, and trust me, things are about to get wild. He realizes his teleportation spell failed him, landing him flat on his face in the dusty cellars of his ruined fortress. He groans, realizing he should be used to these rough arrivals by now, while searching for changes in the ruins. Nearby, a band of survivors is hauling heavy monomachinery, moving with a purpose that seems new to this wasteland. If not for the village ruins, he wouldn't recognize his own home, making him wonder where Commander Joanna had gone. Suddenly, a voice from the shadows asks if he has finally decided to return to his people after all this time. James jumps, telling her to never sneak up on a lord like that, but Joanna just mocks him for being startled. He asks when she arrived, demanding a full report on the realm since she clearly hasn't been too busy to haunt him. She stares in silence, thinking he is a great actor, and trust me, you and I know she will get revenge soon. She begins detailing the chaos in her territory, signaling him to follow so they can talk while patrolling the fortress walls. Joanna mentions that Lady Yvette is still deep in her enchanted slumber and likely won't wake for quite some time yet. James realizes just how close she had gotten, knowing he wouldn't have had a chance to react if she were an enemy. As the subjects bow to their lord, she explains this is the new guild hall being built for their growing army. They have fortified the outer walls with heavy ballistas and iron fire cannons, currently meant to keep the undead and brigands away. She adds that within 2 moons, they will have even more powerful magic weaponry ready to defend the kingdom's borders from threats. Looking at the expensive gear, James whistles at the cost and asks how the peace talks with the duchy are progressing. Joanna reports that by late summer, the flow of monocrystals and building materials had increased through their new trade routes. By the summer moon, they had traded vast amounts of crystals and stone for the fortress's massive new constructions. You see that? A few days ago she was a fierce lioness over potatoes. Now she's talking gold without blinking. She argues that building a proper stronghold requires a fortune, and anyone who skimps on gold is asking for a death. James is shocked by her leadership, having previously assumed she was only good for swinging a sword and spilling blood. She warns that 57 rival tribes have already noticed their rising power and are desperate to make contact with him. These groups range from minor bandit clans to great houses, and James knows that such numbers mean nothing but trouble. He recalls being ambushed by a band of ruthless sellswords in the 6th district the last time he sought profit. The only reason these vultures have not struck Joanna's group yet is because they fear the power of his house. To stay safe, they have banned all fires beyond the safe zone to avoid drawing any more unwanted attention to them. Entry is strictly forbidden for all outsiders, and the commanders are simply waiting for James to pass his final judgment. Surveying the defenses, James asks exactly how many knights the fortress can actually support in a full-scale siege right now. She reveals they acquired enchanted combat mirrors, allowing every peasant in the village to master the arts of war quickly. Later, the lady shows him the training mirrors, noting these were among the first magical models ever to be produced. They are also tempering the soldiers with alchemical elixirs and have already exhausted the most recent shipment they received. After 50 vials of Class Delta serum, James asks about ancient tongues. And trust me, we are just getting started. Stick with me. You and I are about to see if Alistair can actually build his own legendary kingdom from scratch. He plans to give Alara some divine elixirs, so she can become his elite bodyguard and personal royal driver. He mentions needing the gear for a specific mission, so he's taking one of the magical slates right now. With a permanent nightly order at the stronghold, they could finally protect all the other survivors in the wild. He orders a trade post built at the gates to sell biscuits to those lost souls in exchange for stones. Jeline asks why they'd trade, since she didn't think those beggars had anything worth buying from their meager stash. Alistair says anything useful works, and the value doesn't matter. They just need to show off their absolute power. Now pay attention. This is how he's secretly winning their hearts and making it clear he's ready to outshine all his rival lords. Watching him, Genevieve thinks he's right, since those desperate people aren't easy to rule or control at all. But Jeline tells her to relax, because their manual labor force is growing much bigger every single day. She reminds her to pay every worker 30 mana stones as a salary for their loyal and hard work. After all, you can't keep people as volunteers forever if you want them to stay dedicated to the cause. The girl is impressed, realizing she totally misread him and that he actually cares about the common folk. Alistair just smiles and tells her that of course he cares, since this land is his true home. Then Jeline asks who he spent the night with, which makes him feel incredibly awkward and uneasy. She tosses him into a recovery capsule since he went silent, planning to interrogate his companion sometime later. Silas is deep in work inside the secret back-end alchemy development lab as he analyzes the new enchanted artifacts. Alistair is surprised the guy is so focused, he didn't even notice his presence as he entered the room. He looks down at the 2 enchanted slates. He brought specifically for 𝒑𝒐𝒂𝒍 to work on earlier that day. 𝒑𝒂𝒍 is thrilled his lord has finally returned after Lady Seraphina made him hunt for hidden magic bugs. Genevieve mentions she's been way too busy to stay at the stronghold lately due to her many duties. He asks how the project turned out while grabbing the slate to see the progress for himself. Alistair thinks the man really worked hard on this, and the high-tech magic screen looks absolutely stunning. Trust me, you and I have never seen magic tech this advanced in any other kingdom across the entire continent. A spirit familiar pops up on the screen, introducing itself as his new loyal and magical assistant. Surprised, Alistair wonders what it is, as the little spirit follows him everywhere he looks on the slate. It says it's his loyal servant, and he just needs to use the menu for any spell or task. 𝒑𝒂𝒍 mentions that if the spirit gets too annoying, he can just switch it over to text mode instead. The young man thinks this is huge, as the spirit speaks with perfect human-level intelligence and speech. This spirit familiar actually started the conversation itself, which is totally different from the simple talking statues in his world. The assistant apologizes because there are no illusion games on the slate yet, but it can search for them. It would need to scour the magic ley lines if he has any specific request for a game to play. 𝒑𝒂𝒍 plugs a mana cable into the slate, so the artificial intelligence can help him search for all that hidden information. There's no main archive here, but he backed up data from 2017 to 2027 to help find what is needed. Genevieve asks to download a racing game with the best graphics the spirit can find, and the familiar soon finishes the task. Soon enough, the spirit has the game ready, telling her to enjoy the high-speed magic and realistic visuals. Alistair thinks the graphics are hyper-realistic, looking just like a high-end scrying mirror or a master-level illusion. 𝒑𝒂𝒍 wonders why the boss is so shocked by what he considers to be very primitive and basic technology. Alistair praises his work and names him the Minister of Communication and Technology for the entire survival stronghold. As a reward, his pay is increased to 1 tin of premium royal meat every single day of the week. Overjoyed, 𝒑𝒂𝒍 thanks the Lord for his kindness, thinking this must all be a beautiful and rewarding dream. Night falls, and Alistair returns once again to his own world to handle his business and home life. And that's where we leave it. Let's see what happens when he visits the lady's manor late at night. He rings her bell and waits a long time, but absolutely nobody comes to open the door for him. He assumes she's ignoring him since he only visits at night, though he truly didn't have much time left. All right, you and I are about to see what happens when a legend returns home with a forbidden magical relic. Julian calls his assistant, Clara, who sounds completely exhausted. When she finally wakes, he asks what happened to her. She claims it is nothing but a bit of fatigue, despite resting in a luxury estate within the royal district. She apologizes for her drowsiness, but Julian explains he has finally secured the ancient magical cipher they needed to decode. He needs her to analyze the artifact and get the network online immediately, asking her to unlock the tower doors. Suffering from a mysterious fever, she tells him to just leave the relic outside. Julian realizes she is seriously ill. He offers to take her to the great cathedral healers, but Clara is reluctant, claiming she just needs her medicine. Julian tells her it is not a request. He sweeps her into his arms, heading straight for the horse carriage. Sometime later, they arrive at the Healers Guild. As he tries to help the girl stand, she pushes him away. She insists she can walk on her own. Julian is confused, considering he just carried her through the entire city. He cannot understand this woman. She was helpless a moment ago, but now she acts like a proud, noble lady. Now pay attention to this, Clara slips, but Julian catches her instantly, warning her not to make things worse. As he carries her into the cathedral, the crowds whisper, assuming they are a high-ranking couple on a secret date. Julian watches from the shadows as Clara speaks with the high healers, wondering why a simple cold takes this long. He worries that if her condition is truly serious, she might need to be confined to the sanctum for weeks. Nearby, a young woman asks about her father. The healer admits they are worried because the shadow blight is lethal. The son argues it is impossible. His father was never bitten by a cursed beast, so how did he catch it? The healer hesitates to answer. The boy demands to know how the shadow blight could have infected a noble knight. The daughter insists they have no beasts at home, and her father never leaves the castle, questioning the whole diagnosis. The healer explains that the incubation of this curse can last a year, and without a holy blessing, it is fatal. If the sacred antidote is not administered in time, saving the man's soul becomes an impossible task for any healer. Frustrated, the young soldier asks if the healer is giving up on his father. The healer desperately tries to calm him. Julian observes the scene, sensing a strange influence. The healer is clearly lying and contradicting his own medical knowledge. Everyone around seems terrified. Julian notices the boy's fine clothes, but his posture screams he is a seasoned battlefield soldier. Looking at the boy's gear, he seems like a regular guard, but his stance proves he belongs to the King's Legion. Here is where it gets interesting. A man demands to know why Julian is staring, but he just gets ignored. Julian wonders if this man is just a subordinate. Irritated, the man shouts again, but Julian just checks his mirror. The man sits beside him, fuming. A magical message arrives, warning Julian it is already midnight and time for rest. His assistant asks if he plans to sleep. Julian says he must finish this first and tells her to go ahead. The aggressive man demands to see Julian's communication mirror, but Julian ignores him entirely, leaving the man absolutely livid. Enraged by Julian's cold attitude, the man swings a heavy fist, claiming he gave the boy a fair warning. However, Julian easily blocks the strike. The man wonders if this kid actually intends to challenge a trained warrior. Julian thinks to himself that the more he tries to avoid trouble, the more these idiots seem to find him. Clara watches the commotion from the doorway, asking the aggressive man exactly what he thinks he is doing there. The man suddenly looks terrified of her, begging Julian to release him. He realizes he has made a massive mistake. He tries to pull away, but Julian's grip is like a mountain vice. He is too embarrassed to beg for help. A high-ranking commander approaches, noticing Julian's talent. He asks which martial arts academy trained such a powerful young man. He asks Julian to let the matter go, knowing his subordinate is a veteran, but now looks completely powerless. Julian is surprised. It is always in these moments that the big boss shows up to defend his weak soldiers. He wonders what the commander is talking about. He thought he was just dealing with a common tavern brawler. Observing the commander's aura, Julian realizes he was wrong. This man is not just a soldier, he is a master. He assumes the man must truly love the art of combat. Julian claims he only used a tiny bit of strength. The commander is impressed by Julian's power, asking if he would like to join the kingdom's elite special forces. Julian casually declines the offer. The daughter screams, asking if he is mad while their father lies dying nearby. So what do you and I make of this? A hero refuses a throne while a life hangs in the balance. All right, you and I are about to see if Julian can save a man everyone else has already given up on. Julian feels relieved that the sister stopped a major fight. He asks the man to show his scrying logs. Julian mentions there was nothing suspicious, and he was only there to help a friend, seeking no trouble. The woman thanks him and promises she won't bother him again, offering a sincere apology for the incident. The young man says they were leaving, but Seraphina notices her brother hasn't given up on Julian yet. Sebastian asks the protagonist if he knows how to cure the crimson madness, shocking everyone in the room. Julian just laughs, asking the noble if he actually looks like some kind of legendary royal doctor. Seraphina tells them to accept the truth, saying they would face the coming tragedy together as a family. Julian notices the man's excitement and thinks curing this blight with his elixirs wouldn't be a problem at all. He could have even cured his friend Lyra, instead of sending her to the High Temple for treatment. The boy asks for the protagonist's name. He responds that he is Julian, a simple traveler in their land. The boy is Sebastian, and his sister is Seraphina. They ask if Julian has a secret remedy for them. They promise to reward him with anything he desires. Julian considers the weight of helping such a powerful family. He could heal him easily, but the fallout is the problem. A simple family is one thing, but nobles. Their high status could bring immense tension. A miracle cure might be seen as something far more dangerous. On the other hand, their power could be an advantage, helping Julian earn a fortune and gain protection. It is a double-edged sword, so he needs to see what kind of people they truly are first. He needs to judge their character first. Suddenly, Lady Alara snaps, telling them to stop trusting some random stranger. The royal healer agrees, telling the family they must trust the experts instead of this mysterious young man. Julian ignores them and offers to help. The doctor tries to block him, claiming he must protect his patient. Julian ignores them and offers to help. The doctor tries to block him, claiming he must protect his patient from some random stranger. Lady Alara mentions her father is the secretary of the Royal Council, making it clear she doesn't trust Julian. Julian fires back, saying he hates being doubted. Whether their father lives or dies is no longer his concern. He reminds them they were the ones who bothered him. He was just offering help to a dying man. Besides, their traditional medicine would never be enough to stop a blight as potent as the Crimson Madness. Now pay attention here, because Julian is about to take a 1% chance and turn it into a miracle. Sebastian says he trusts Julian. Once the symptoms show, the death rate is absolute and the final end is truly agonizing. They should gamble on Julian, even if there is only a 1% chance of the man surviving. Julian realizes the boy isn't a fool. He stands up and says he only needs 10 quiet minutes. He demands no interruptions. The doctor tries to stop him, but Sebastian takes full responsibility for the outcome. Serafina starts to protest, but Julian cuts her off. She realizes this is their only hope for survival. Julian notices a scrying stone watching his every move. He knows he cannot let them see his secret medical techniques. You and I both know Julian has a trick up his sleeve. Let's see him work. Using a flash of light to hide, he grabs an essence spark from his pouch to begin the healing. Since the man is in a coma, no one will ask questions. A bit later, Julian exits the room. Lady Alara asks for the result. Julian simply says their father just needs a little bit more sleep. She asks for his contact details so her father can thank him. Julian thinks she is still quite worried. Julian sees how worried she is and hands her a small calling card, offering a way to stay in touch. He tells her his details are in the hospital records, but Sebastian steps in and tosses the card away immediately. He says they don't need cards. From this day forward, Julian is his brother and no one will dare touch him. Just then, a loud noise comes from the sick room. Julian tells them their father has a strong body and is awake. Sebastian and his sister rush inside. Their father is sitting up with tears in his eyes, feeling the life return. The healer is in total shock, demanding to know what secret method Julian used to save the dying High Secretary. Over 55,000 people die of this blight every year, but Julian refuses to reveal how he cured the man. And that is where we leave Julian, keeping his secret safe for now. Trust me, you and I need to see what happens next. All right, you and I are about to see a duke come back from the dead, thanks to a mysterious genius. His son explains they found a legendary healer, and Alistair rejoices that the deadly curse has finally been lifted. The lady admits she hates giving credit, but her brother really did find a master capable of purging the infection. Understanding the gravity, the Duke declares he has no complaints and insists on thanking this mysterious savior in person. He asks for every detail of the ritual and where this healer resides, hoping to pay his respects very soon. But the son sighs, explaining the man was here just moments ago before being escorted out of the manor. The Duke wonders who could possibly possess such power, while the lady snaps at the guards for letting him escape. She demands to know why they did not get his name, but the young knight was too frantic for his father. Their father calms them, saying they will surely cross paths again, but now he requires absolute silence to recover strength. He sends them away, joking that he is not dead yet and still has a kingdom to run and oversee. Most people in the kingdom are familiar with legends of spirits, always trying to enslave the entire human race. They always lose to the hero, yet our modern society keeps trying to harness this dangerous and unexplored magical power. It remains a mystery that could take centuries to master, but the figure staring into the crystal sphere is no amateur. He is a master cipher breaker, and to him, the Duke's legendary vault was nothing more than a simple child's game. The guild thought their wards were unbreakable, but they are about to learn what happens when a true professional takes aim. A week later, a captain apologizes to his lord, reporting that their best mages have failed to breach the network. The lord fumes, asking how his hand-picked elites could be so useless when it comes to cracking Alistair's magic seals. The captain admits there has been zero progress, but the lord surprisingly lets it go, knowing other noble houses are failing. He asks for a final summary of the intel they gathered on this mysterious new player in the capital's high circles. Handing over a heavy scroll, the captain confirms all the data is there, prompting the lord to make a bold move. He orders a meeting with Alistair to buy his guild outright, offering 20 million gold coins to seal the deal. The same scene is playing out across every noble estate, as the wealthiest lords scramble to claim this young genius. Even the grandmasters are talking about this boy from the distant east, sparking a feeding frenzy among the world's elite. Now pay attention. At the very heart of this chaos, we find Alistair casually enjoying a snack without a care. His advisor, Alara, reports that over 500,000 gold has been dumped into the market to manufacture false hype. They have shattered every sales record in a single week, but for Alistair, this is just the beginning of his plan. He wants more, while Alara keeps listing the massive rewards and honors waiting for them at the royal palace gate. 12 major merchant guilds are begging for partnerships, yet Alistair simply asks his assistant to clear his busy afternoon schedule. Alara mentions a bid of 3 million gold has arrived, but Alistair's reaction is not what anyone would ever expect. He scoffs, declaring he wouldn't sell for 100 million, insulted that they would dare offer such a tiny sum. You and I both know his pride is massive, but Alara asks if he shouldn't at least secure a royal patent. Alistair laughs, certain no mage can crack his spells for 50 years, and by then, his magic will have evolved further. They would be chasing ghosts, but Alara insists she has a better plan to establish a more permanent base of operations. She suggests founding a proper guild hall so he can control his disciples and work in the privacy he truly deserves. As she leaves, Alistair asks her to use his first name, but she reminds him that they are strictly on business. She keeps her heart guarded. Meanwhile, over at the academy, a young student is rushing to show her new familiar. Beside her is the noble lady who was furious with Alistair earlier, now staring curiously at a glowing communication crystal. The student presents the gem, and the noblewoman asks if it is some new illusion, prompting her friend to just speak. Addressing the crystal, she asks if this spirit can really sing a melody for her skeptical friend, who refuses to believe. The spirit replies that it doesn't care for the opinions of strangers. It only lives to serve its lovely mistress. The tiny sprite appears, asking the noblewoman what sort of music she prefers so it can tailor the perfect song. Shocked, the woman asks if a person is hiding inside the gem, but the sprite confirms it is pure arcane energy. The student is amazed at how Alistair crafted such a lifelike being, as its movements and reactions feel so incredibly human. Her friend nods, admitting she was just as stunned, but the real power of this enchanted stone is even more terrifying. So, what do you and I make of this? A spirit that triples your casting speed is absolutely game-changing. All right, you and I are about to see how a genius created the kingdom's greatest secret. Imagine a sentient spirit trapped in a small crystal. The young lady placed it down and asked for a portrait. Moments later, the spirit complied. Then, she asked to send those magical images to everyone in her social circle. She mentioned the spell was called Arcanum 1. It could be bound to any magic stone with ease. But she warned everyone to beware of the cheap counterfeits flooding the markets, because this spell was already legendary. It was so popular that it shattered every record on its first day. A noblewoman nearby asked why she was boasting. It wasn't even her own creation. The girl snapped back, saying the founder was a former scholar of this very academy. Word on the street was that the guild masters would be arriving by dawn to recruit new talent for their house. The noblewoman asked why the girl was so excited. Meanwhile, Julian stood beside Alina, analyzing some reports. He was busy analyzing something. Alina told him that 14 more counterfeit versions of his spell had appeared. Among them, 7 were using the name Light to trick people. Julian knew the public weren't fools. They knew what was fake, but the guild still needed a team of high court lawyers for protection. If people felt threatened by a soulless spell with security flaws, his business was doomed. He needed a total guarantee. If users lost gold due to a magic error, the guild would compensate every single coin from their own treasury. Alina asked what would happen if the wards were breached. Julian looked her in the eyes with total confidence. Now pay attention, because his next words define his power. He told her his magic simply could not be broken. With the wards secured, the rest was up to her. Soon after, a messenger announced the fair opens in 30 minutes. A lady reminded them the time was near, urging them not to pressure the young initiates during the recruitment process. Julian left it all to Alina. He trusted her to find the sharpest minds to join their growing magic guild. She warned him not to be shocked by the massive crowd, but Julian had seen far worse in his past. He remembered starving refugees fighting for scraps in a dark future. To him, this little fair was nothing but child's play. Suddenly, a massive line of people appeared, all waiting for Julian. A man mentioned he was a legendary master artificer. One after another, countless applicants began to present their skills. Julian spent hours evaluating every single person in line. He was completely drained after the vetting, yet he noticed Alina didn't look tired at all. She said she was used to long days. Julian stepped away for a moment, making her wonder where he went. He returned with 2 cups of warm tea, telling her to take a breather. She smiled, touched by his kindness. Exhaustion finally took over, and Julian fell asleep. Alina realized that beneath his cold exterior, he truly cared for others. Time passed, and Julian was back on his feet, interviewing more people. That's when a familiar lady stepped forward. After boasting about her legal skills, she claimed to be a devoted user of his magic. Julian thought she was airheaded. I know what you're thinking, is she just a talker? Well, Alina decided to put her to the test. She asked what the girl would do first as their counsel. The lady boldly suggested suing every thief for magic infringement. Julian felt she was too emotional for the high courts, where a single mistake could ruin a noble house's reputation forever. But before he could reject her, Alina told him to let her finish. What they heard next left them speechless. The girl dismantled the fakes using ancient guild laws. Julian was completely lost, having no idea what she was saying. The lady bowed, thanking them for the opportunity. Julian realized she was actually a brilliant legal mind. She was articulate and sharp. Julian asked for her time, wondering if they had finally found the right person. They needed to discuss wages and benefits. Shaking hands, it seemed they had sealed the blood bond contract. The girl was completely thrilled with what she had achieved. This was the greatest moment of her life. At the grand celebratory banquet, the host prepared to introduce a young superstar who was only 23 years old. Julian walked through the crowd of nobles. After his presentation, he felt like Alina had tricked him into this. She insisted he maintain the guild's image, forcing him to memorize every word. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman watched from the balcony. She recognized him instantly. It was Julian. A devious smile grew as she realized things were getting much more interesting. Later, our hero stood alone, staring at the kingdom. He hated these fancy parties and planned to leave as soon as possible. He noticed a woman behind him and asked who she was. You and I both know this encounter changes everything. Now pay attention to this mysterious newcomer. He asks who she is, and she wonders if they have time to gather rations for the journey. You and I are jumping into a story where Julian finally recognizes the mysterious girl from the hospital. He didn't expect her to be the daughter of Lord Sterling, a famous nobleman who attended his old academy. Julian asks if she is here for a trade alliance, but she says she only came for one question. She isn't here to steal secrets. As the academy reporter, she just wants an interview with the top graduate. They talk for 90 minutes, but it's all trivial. She seems to be carefully testing him for now. Once finished with her questions, she mentions she has one final request before she leaves for the day. She asks for his private contact number. As he gives it, he realizes she's already using his inventions. She admits her father wants to meet his savior. The old Duke is more eager than ever before. He is desperate to speak with the protagonist himself. That's exactly why she needs Julian to visit soon. Julian realizes another high-status lady has appeared. He bids her goodbye, knowing his future depends on the crown. Lord Sterling is a massive power in the government. Whatever Julian builds next will depend on the Duke's favor. Stick with me, because now we see Julian clad in heavy plate armor in a ruined future. This all began when he returned to the wasteland a week ago, leaving his stable business behind. He's back in the apocalyptic world. The company wasn't fully ready yet, but he had to come home. It had been a long time since his last visit. Immediately, he notices the stronghold is eerily quiet. He wonders where Jane and Alara have gone. He doesn't hear any noise from the usual construction site. Could they have finished the walls? He doubts it. He realizes there isn't a single soul in sight. He questions where everyone went. Suddenly, a message appears telling him to meet at the wall's far end. He's warned to put on his filtration mask immediately. Meanwhile, Jane waits, knowing the situation is truly dire. She knows Julian should be arriving soon. This crisis is far more difficult than she first thought. Julian appears on the ramparts and asks why construction stopped. Jane tells him he needs to see for himself. Things are not normal. A month ago, the blighted outside began to rage, swarming the entire base walls. They couldn't risk the noise of hammers anymore. The monsters were being affected by something strange and new. Now pay attention here. They aren't just hunting at night. They are active during the day as well. Jane still doesn't know why, but the toxic bacteria levels in the air have reached a dangerous new peak. That's why masks are mandatory. Everyone with the genetic serum has immunity, but the levels are still rising fast. The air is becoming as lethal as the zombies themselves. Julian recalls they usually relied on the sun's energy. He remembers they were supposed to move by photosynthesis. Jane replies that their usual cycle has broken. Normally, they'd wander peacefully by day to carry spores. Now, they only know pure, unending rage and hunger. Julian asks if the bacteria has entered their bodies and adapted. Jane agrees it's a very real, terrifying possibility. They lack scientific proof, but her sources in Sector 6 say the plague is coming from a source. Some kind of focal point is spreading the rot. Julian asks what happened to the nearby survivor camps. Jane sighs, saying they're the only base left in the region. They are the largest group, but paralyzed. They were unable to act against the horde. Julian says letting this continue will lead to their doom. It's time to take the initiative and kill the source of the plague, but leaving now would be problematic. The bacteria is drawing the zombies straight to the humans. They won't be able to find any allies. Every survivor out there is being swarmed. Jane mentions the old sewer entrances are deep within Sector 6. They need to reach that place to eliminate the heart of the rot. Julian feels the heavy air. It's getting thicker by the second, making any approach nearly impossible. But Jane has a new battle plan. She will lead the troops tomorrow morning. Julian instantly speaks up, saying he will help her fight too. Jane quickly refuses to let him go, but Julian asks her to just let him finish what he's saying. She demands to know why she should listen. He replies that his combat skills are second to none. He can escape any battle if things go wrong. He refuses to leave his woman alone in this hell. Julian thinks to himself that if she goes alone, she'll end up slaughtering every survivor she finds out there. Reluctantly, Jane agrees to let him go. And trust me, you and I won't forget the battle that follows. Finding supplies was easy for a skilled knight like him. Sometime later, our main character finds himself in a serious meeting with Lord Silas. He tells Silas they shouldn't waste any more breath. He wants to cut the small talk and get straight to the point. Arthur remembers how magic projections burn through one mana crystal every minute. Then Lord Alaric replies with an unexpected offer to the group. You and I both know something's fishy here. Alaric wants to increase their trade volume, leaving our hero stunned by what he's hearing. Alaric mentions they are down to less than 1,000 crates of preserved fruit, showing him the official ledger for their supplies. The High Governor presents a new proposal that leaves Arthur in shock. The numbers on the parchment have increased by a massive amount. Considering the previous market rate, the total for the deal would be rising to roughly about 450,000 mana crystals. Enchanted armor only costs 10,000. Trust me, you and I need to see what's next.